Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376: A Fierce Battle. A muffled boom. The continuous onslaught left Black Manta dazed. He'd miscalculated the timing of the mine's detonation, and it exploded in Aquaman's hand just as it touched his skin. Both men were struck by the impact. Though Black Manta's left hand was cushioned by his wetsuit, the direct impact still left him severely wounded. Aquaman, shirtless, was even more vulnerable. He'd taken the full brunt of the blow. A 5-centimeter wound had been blasted into a massive hole, revealing the faintest traces of his internal organs. "Stay away," a stunned Aquaman, seeing signs of a potential attack, quickly intervened. The enemy was barely alive, he couldn't let them take advantage. He stumbled over to Manta, raised his massive fist, and struck. Realizing the man's wetsuit was well protected, he attacked his half-exposed head. "Do you admit defeat? How dare you hunt down my companions? How dare you offend the dignity of Atlantis?" Black Manta was only human, and after 2 blows, he couldn't take it anymore, fainting in a daze. Aquaman, despite his remarkable resilience, was still in a trance, relying solely on his unwavering resolve to keep punching. "Arthur, he's unconscious. You're the winner." Mara looked at her husband like a devoted fan, her eyes filled with love. "I won. Yes, I won." Aquaman Arthur Curry stood tall, right fist raised high, savoring his hard-earned victory. Thea gritted her teeth at the sight. Aquaman was now covered in wounds. A long knife pierced each shoulder and arm, and his body was covered in a multitude of scattered needles, daggers, and other sharp objects. A gaping hole had been blown through his stomach, a barbed rope was wrapped around his neck, and a large area of his left cheek had been burned by Black Manta's laser. Those who knew him would say that Black Manta's versatility was specifically designed to counter Aquaman. Those who didn't, from a distance, might have mistaken him for a cameo appearance by Whitebird from Marineford. "How dare you beat a common man with no combat training like this? And you still have the nerve to raise your arms and shout." For the sake of the Deathly Hallows staff and the maintenance of friendly neighborly relations with Atlantis, Thea turned away, suppressing the urge to rant. It was a brutal fight. Thea waited a moment before Aquaman finally stopped his silly, arm-raising cry. Thea guessed that his injuries were too severe to shout. She raised her hand and cast a healing spell on him. Although his recovery would be greatly enhanced upon entering the sea, Thea feared he would die before reaching the shore. In the interest of fairness, she also cast a healing spell on Black Manta, who was still on the ground. He didn't have Aquaman's recovery ability. His face was deformed, as if he'd been run over by a train. Without external treatment, it would take at least a year or 2 for him to recover. Black Manta was securely tied up, and his men were of no concern. Without time to discuss, Yavala opened her magical portal and transported everyone to the seashore. Aquaman Arthur Curry was bleeding profusely, and his recovery was slower than the rate of bleeding, leaving him too weak to speak. Once in the North Sea, Mara gently controlled the water and swept her husband into the ocean. They waited for less than half an hour before a vibrant Aquaman reappeared within sight. "This guy's recovery in the sea is incredible." Thea couldn't help but think that fighting this guy would require leaving the water. Otherwise, his recovery would rival that of a Kryptonian, and no one could defeat him underwater. "Arthur, should I hand this guy over to the AOM or should you take him?" Thea asked, seeing that Aquaman had almost recovered. Well, Aquaman, now recovered from his injuries, regained his composure. He looked at the battered Black Manta with a pang of guilt. He had killed his father and then beaten him so badly. Now handing him over to the AOM seemed too cruel. He carefully considered his words. "He's killed many Atlanteans. I want him brought back to face justice." Thea nodded, agreeing with the solution. Black Manta was practically harmless on land, so Aquaman would only be asking for trouble if he tried to save him. But that was none of Thea's business. Aquaman was taking Black Manta back to Atlantis, but he hadn't arranged for the others to visit. Thea, who, now with her water attribute, didn't like the water, naturally didn't mention it. She remembered Aquaman's own messy affairs, and she had no interest in participating. A flash of white light flashed from the trident, and even without an oxygen mask, Black Manta was dragged into the sea. Everyone watched them swim directly into the depths, while Thea and the others returned to the plane and headed for the Death King's Isle. It was already night when they arrived over the Atlantic Ocean. A light mist rose from the surface, and the waves rose gently. A few islands dotted the landscape, making it a beautiful sight for sightseeing. Unfortunately, none of them were the Death King's Isle they were looking for. Thea, Diana, and Mara had never been here before, so the task of finding the way naturally fell to Aquaman's friends. However, since they were either autistic, mentally ill, or had never learned geography, they didn't refuse, and the task of finding the way automatically fell to the old detective. The old man initially patted his chest and promised no problem, but after an hour of traversing the Atlantic, his tone became less certain. During this hour, the old man patted his chest more than 10 times, but his words became increasingly weak, from it's nearby to maybe nearby. In desperation, the group landed on an island, and Mara used her special communication method to call Aquaman. The group waited in boredom. Diana exchanged martial arts skills with the others, while Thea and Yavala returned to her jungle and picked up a 1-month-old jaguar to take back to Star City for fun. Of Aquaman's small group, Thea had the best relationship with a girl who grew up in the woods. Yavala was quite simple-minded, stubbornly believing that anyone who treated animals well was a good person. She had noticed Thea's relationship with Diana and was deeply envious. She had a crush on the Arab woman, Cassina, but hadn't dared to express it publicly. They waited all night, and near dawn the next day, they finally saw Aquaman's exhausted figure. No scars, no signs of a fight, indicating that his journey home was anything but pleasant. Without further ado, they followed him silently. Based on their previous experience with the island, Thea concluded that it possessed a strange enchantment, similar to Paradise Island. It was impossible to find it with the naked eye, but Aquaman's trident would automatically guide them. Instead of flying, Aquaman summoned several docile dolphins for them to ride. Chapter 377 The Death King's Staff. After sitting for a while, Thea grew impatient and changed into her water combat armor. Last time, with Fire, she hadn't been at her fastest, so she wanted to test her own speed underwater. I didn't expect you to swim so fast. Aquaman Mara, who also swam independently without a dolphin, was startled by Thea's sudden burst of speed. While it wasn't as fast as Aquaman wielding a trident, it was very close to Mara's speed. Let me have a swimming contest with you. Mara's day hadn't been smooth sailing. She couldn't understand the affection between human women. She felt her husband was a man of integrity. The Arab woman Cassina, the brown-skinned wild child Yavala, Thea, and Diana all posed a threat to her position, with the unusually active Thea being the most threatening. She certainly couldn't defeat her on land, but in the sea, she didn't think she could lose. Thea didn't think twice. Just let it go, no rules or referees needed. They both prepared to swim forward simultaneously. She drew on the armor's energy source for power, while Mara, possessing near-infinite stamina in the ocean, launched simultaneously like arrows from a bow. Mara quickly took the lead with her deft movements. Thea instructed Gideon to analyze her movements, including her angle of entry and body oscillation frequency. He then calculated and optimized the results, applying them to the armor. She quickly caught up. So fast, Mara, unaware of the existence of artificial intelligence, saw Thea's familiar movements, clearly mimicking her own swimming style. She assumed Thea had mastered them in a single observation, astonished. This land dweller's learning ability was truly astonishing. While astonished, she was far from convinced. Mara mobilized a vast amount of seawater, applying a propulsion force, and her speed increased by another 30%. So there was a way to do it. Thea felt like she had mastered another trick. This time, she didn't need Gideon. Although she didn't usually use it, she also possessed water attributes. Following Mara's example, she also gathered a large ball of water magic behind her, propelling herself forward. 1,500 nautical miles, 1,600 nautical miles, 1,650 nautical miles. The effect of the push was immediate, and Gideon reported her speed truthfully, eventually settling at nearly 1,700 nautical miles per hour. Mara sensed she was catching up again and raced to speed. Thea followed at a leisurely pace behind her. By the time they reached the Death King's Island and disembarked, Thea was still in high spirits, while Mara's face was pale with exhaustion. She spent a long time soaking in the sea alone before catching her breath. "Did you fight her again?" Diana asked Thea quietly, looking at the pale Mara. "No, I was just behind her. I never passed her the whole time." I have to say, she swims really fast. Thea acted calmly, completely unfazed, using nothing but the armor's energy. She was also puzzled, not realizing it was this very never-passing doubt had forced Mera to use her fastest speed in her life. Aquaman, perplexed by his wife's desperate swim, offered some comfort. Mera, her legs trembling, feigned nothing, and then pulled Aquaman aside for a moment of affection. Unfortunately, the 4 women present, besides her, were all involved in illicit relationships. Of the 3 remaining men, one was severely autistic, the other half was haunted and half-mad. The only sane person was the old detective, but he was 70 years old. And his grandson was already 20. He couldn't appreciate Mera's good intentions. Mera, after a moment of affection, noticed that the onlookers were stable and had no reactions. She felt like she'd punched nothing, and with some frustration, she followed the others to the island. The island was small, even the Eye of Horus wouldn't have been able to detect it unless they were up close. Vegetation was sparse, and within sight lay a modest mountain, from which dark red lava occasionally flowed. The intense heat seemed to shroud the island in a layer of invisible black smoke. Several people entered a deep cave nestled in the side of the mountain. As they walked, they seemed to have lost interest in conversation and cautiously made their way deeper. After an hour of winding paths, the view suddenly opened up, revealing a man-made platform. Atop it stood a massive throne, and behind it, 4 female statues circled, some looking up, some bowing. Aquaman pointed at the female statues and said, "The artifacts they possessed were placed on those statues." Aquaman observed them for a moment. The dead king had fallen into deep slumber, and the island was merely a deception to conceal his death. The arrangement was simple, perhaps because the era he lived in still pursued the maximization of magical power, and the sophistication of its application was far less sophisticated than modern magic. Find any 3 artifacts, use them, but don't release them. I'll find the resonant frequency to unlock the hidden compartment. Yavala first produced her golden teleportation bead, while Cassina produced the golden seal that Black Manta had stolen. Aquaman then raised his trident. The vibrations of the 3 artifacts were very similar. Thea carefully sensed the differences between them, gently dancing her hands to adjust their resonance. Finally, at a certain point, the 3 artifacts reached a very strange frequency range. An invisible breeze swept in all directions, and the female statue behind the throne slowly parted, and a golden staff slowly rose from it. The staff was 2 meters long and golden in color. The head of the staff was originally similar to a trident, but later the 3 prongs were artificially combined into a ring. The sides were extremely sharp, and a closer look revealed ancient inscriptions on them. The staff resembled a staff Thea remembered from a game, the golden staff of the Sindori. Thea looked back at everyone, and seeing no objections, she reached out to pick up the staff. The staff neither rejected her nor actively complied with her. The sky and earth changed color, the wind and clouds surged, but none of these things occurred. Only a faint image reached Thea, depicting an old man tragically betrayed, forging a divine artifact and returning to his homeland for revenge. Abandoned by everyone, the old man, in anger, struck a magical node with his staff, causing the destruction of the ancient Atlantean Empire. Could this old man be the dead King Atlan? Comparing her memories with her own, Thea sighed. What a shame. His ideals were good, to eliminate war and embrace all alien races, but betrayal by his own people transformed him from a great hero into a demon. Just as Thea was about to examine the staff's function, a high-pitched shout echoed. "Surface man! Put down your treasure. It's a sacred relic of Atlantis." A crowd of strangely dressed soldiers entered, surrounding a young man holding a halberd and wearing a fish fin helmet. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 Brothers. What idiot? Just call it, and see if it responds. Xia, now stronger, was naturally not as cautious as before. When the other party was rude, she pushed back forcefully. Surface man. You, the young man in the helmet and holding the halberd hadn't finished speaking when Xia turned her staff and a dark golden lightning bolt shot towards him. He didn't know the real situation and cautiously dodged the attack, but he underestimated Xia's combat experience. Just as he raised his leg and took 2 steps to the left, a sharp ground spike suddenly rose from the landing point, coincidentally aimed at his unspeakable thing. The young man was shocked and no longer cared about his demeanor. He fell backwards to avoid the fatal blow. The ground spike was at a tricky angle, avoiding the sheen guard and cutting a large gash on the inside of his thigh. Blood was dripping. Several men hurried to help him up. "Let go," the young man raged, his helmet falling off, revealing a rather dignified face. His once impressive attire was now smeared with mud from his fall, and blood stained his cape and sheen guards. His once proud aura was abruptly shattered. "How dare you attack me?" the young man gritted his teeth. Thea scornfully replied, "Idiot." Her staff gathered power again. This wasn't a game. Simply handing over a piece of equipment wouldn't reveal its attributes to the user. A staff's precise function required a bit of experimentation. "Stop, everyone." King Arthur Curry stood in the middle, halting the fight between the two sides. Seeing him take the lead, Thea backed off and continued studying the staff. The young man appeared, wearing a fish helmet and wielding a halberd. Considering the strange soldiers behind him, it was easy to guess his identity: Ocean Lord Orm, Arthur Curry's half-brother and his most direct rival for the throne. The relationship between these two brothers is very similar to that of Thor and Loki in Marvel's next-door neighbor, the difference being that the elder brother is half-blood and the younger brother pure-blood, while in Marvel's next-door neighbor, the elder brother is pure-blood and the younger brother half-blood. The similarities are numerous. The elder brother is reckless and the younger brother is cunning. The elder brother has no desire for the throne, yet it falls to him, while the younger brother desperately wants it but cannot secure it. Thea scoffs at this melodramatic love-hate relationship. As long as the other party doesn't provoke her, she doesn't mind her own business. You're following me. Aquaman is no fool. He quickly deciphers the whole story. Orm points at Thea, then with a flick of his finger, includes a whole host of people. "Arthur, you actually gave all the artifacts of Atlantis to these surface dwellers. You don't deserve to be called the king of the seven seas." Thea chuckled and said nothing. Originally, only Diana stood by her side. But now, with Orm's sudden surge of hatred, Aquaman's allies instantly sided with him. They didn't care about the artifact, but Orm's empty promise to take it back was unbearable. Mera hesitated. Orm was trying to seize her husband's throne, and she couldn't support him. With little choice, she sided with Thea. Orm and Aquaman exchanged a few words, and the talks fell apart. In his eyes, Thea was only as powerful as the artifact, and the surfacers were nothing more than weaklings. With a wave of his hand, he commanded his men, "Kill those surfacers. The artifact must belong to Atlantis, don't hurt anyone." Aquaman Arthur Curry shouted, fearing Thea's men might use force, as the soldiers before him were all his own people. Orm misunderstood his words, assuming his feral brother was concerned for his friends. With a sly grin, he held his halberd in hand and tried to entangle Aquaman. But after just 2 moves, he noticed something was amiss. His men rushed forward, only to be driven back like a cloud. Screams rang out incessantly. The normally formidable Atlantean armor seemed to have vanished. Several men were sent flying dozens of meters, their cries filled with agony. "What the hell?" Taking a break from the fight, strained his neck to glance to the side. The one-sided situation he'd anticipated had indeed unfolded, but on his side. A heroic woman, wielding a sword and shield, dispatched his elite guards one by one, like trash. Only his captain managed 3 moves, but Diana showed him special favor, breaking his leg with a kick. The usually valiant captain now clutched his leg and wailed. "These guys aren't strong," Diana told Thea honestly. In her eyes, they were no more formidable than the Germans they'd fought. "That's because you're much stronger than before," Thea could only explain. In her eyes, these elite Atlantean soldiers were quite formidable. Even tens of thousands of them could easily defeat armies from other nations. Their only flaw was that only a handful could fight underwater, and those few had to wear specialized breathing equipment to maximize their effectiveness. Regardless of whether their Atlantean leaders desired peace or war, their bodies were no longer suited to surface life. Conquering the land and restoring their former glory was nothing more than wishful thinking. Surface people are so powerful? This woman is Greek? An Amazon? Orm nearly collapsed. He finally realized what Aquaman had meant by his earlier cry, "Don't hurt anyone." Shame filled him, and he nearly crawled into a hole in the ground. Trying to calm his mind, he carefully examined Diana's appearance and equipment. She was adorned with divine artifacts, no doubt, but the crafting style was distinctly different from their Atlantean counterparts. Unlike Arthur Curry, a wild child, he, Orm, and even Mera, were members of the royal family who had received a rigorous upbringing. While Orm was undoubtedly arrogant, he possessed a basic eye for discernment. Upon closer inspection, it was easy to discern the difference between Diana's appearance and that of a modern human. "Take your men and leave this place now." Aquaman surveyed the area, noting that most of the soldiers had minor injuries that would heal in 2 days underwater rest. He nodded in gratitude to Diana, then turned and barked orders at Orm. Orm, left alone, needed this opportunity to step aside. With a snort, he led his defeated troops and fled. Aquaman sighed. Too much trouble lay ahead. The people on the surface didn't accept him, and the underwater people were rejecting him too. He was like a rat caught in a rage, suffering from both sides. With everything settled, he joined Mara and said goodbye to the others. Thea surveyed the scene, finding no documentation, so she returned to researching the staff's function. She, Diana, and the others left the cave. The cave, bustling with activity just moments before, returned to a state of calm, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 379 Staff Function. Diana continued to work on her foundation, while Thea, clutching the little jaguar and the staff, returned to Star City alone. Leaving the little jaguar in the care of a designated person, she began to research the staff's properties. The staff's attributes were easy to determine. It possessed both earth and water. The staff's power had previously enabled Thea to defeat Orm's earth spikes. With its power, Thea could create a pseudo-circulation within her body of light, darkness, earth, fire, water, and wind. While still far from possessing all 6 attributes, she had a working prototype. Leveraging the staff's earth magic, Thea could already cast some advanced earth spells. Next time, against Catwoman, perhaps a dungeon spell or a large-scale earth-shatter spell would be enough. After 3 days of tireless research, Thea finally summarized the staff's properties. The Death King's staff amplified earth and water spells the most, roughly tripling their effectiveness. Wind, light, and darkness amplified slightly less, only slightly more than doubling their effectiveness. Fire spells were the worst, amplifying less than half their effectiveness. The staff contained 2 very ancient spells, one of which allowed Thea to control sea beasts. The definition of this beast initially puzzled Thea, and after considerable research, she finally understood it referred to a gigantic ancient marine creature. After searching her memory for a long time, Thea could only recall one such beast. She only remembered one that met the criteria, hidden in the abyss of the Atlantean capital. It roughly resembled a cross between a crab and an octopus. For tens of thousands of years, the Atlanteans could only manage to keep their distance from it. That was until Arthur Curry's return. His exceptional telepathic abilities allowed him to control all marine life. While this was a struggle, it did allow him to exert some control over the beast. It was precisely because of this extraordinary ability that the Atlantean Council of Elders broke with a long-standing rule and allowed this hybrid to inherit the throne. If Thea took the staff and went to Atlantis, claiming she could control their largest biological weapon, the Elders would surely fight her to the death. While a good move, it would easily damage bilateral relations. Furthermore, the deep-sea behemoths would undoubtedly be significantly weakened upon reaching land. Thea secretly memorized the spell, hoping to refine it and integrate it into her existing knowledge. The remaining function was even more vague. Thea could only interpret it as a hybrid of a binding and sealing spell, trapping the target within a tiny crystal regardless of size. There was no information on the target's power level or how long the spell would last. Perhaps the dead king who forged the staff knew, but he hadn't left any information inside. Desperate, Thea went to Poison Ivy's greenhouse in Metropolis and tried a bunch of plants, but to no avail. Was it because the plants were too low level, or did the binding spell have some other requirements for the target? With so many options, Thea couldn't immediately guess. During her experiments, Thea discovered another function, not quite a function. This staff, unlike the staffs used by modern wizards, was a weapon in its own right. It wielded with such ferocity that it could kill anyone struck or injure anyone touched. The several man-eating plants Poison Ivy had crushed proved this point perfectly. "Boss, do you have a grudge against my plants?" Poison Ivy said helplessly, her eyelids drooping. As their encounters increased, Thea's true colors began to show. She was 2 years younger than herself, and Poison Ivy was no longer as intimidated by her as she had initially been, occasionally even cracking a few jokes. Just a little experiment. By the way, did you find everything I asked you to collect?" Seeing how she had knocked down a corner of Poison Ivy's greenhouse, Thea was speechless. Her new weapon resembled a hammer more than a staff. She had only enhanced it numerous times, otherwise, ordinary Earthlings wouldn't be able to wield this ancient Atlantean artifact. Turning to business, Poison Ivy grew a bit more serious. "Billy Batson, I've gotten close to this kid. I've collected a fair amount of his hair and blood. As you requested, I've recorded every conversation I have with him, and I've imported the original audio files into the main control computer. Boss, what's the use of this kid? You don't allow me to seduce him. He's too immature. Just chatting with him is really boring," Poison Ivy said, partly puzzled and partly trying to take credit. "It's just a casual move," Thea said calmly. Billy Batson, the future superhero Shazam. She called it a casual move, but in reality, this was her true purpose. Shazam and Black Adam were the only two mortals alive with immense supernatural powers. However, this power wasn't cultivated by them, but granted by a ritual. Shazam, after receiving this power, could instantly rival Superman. This was something Thea had envied for years. Simply absorbing their divine power wasn't enough. Thea needed to spend considerable time artificially downgrading the gifted power into her own magic. Only when her own magic reached its peak could she transform it into her own unique power. The old wizard Shazam, born 9,000 years ago, was a shepherd boy. Blessed by the gods, he became the first Shazam. In that magical desert age, after the gods withdrew, he believed himself to be a true god. Unfortunately, he possessed power but lacked vision. He considered himself the protector of the world, but in reality, he committed countless foolish acts, as Pandora, Black Adam, and Billy Batson did. He chose Billy Batson as his successor. Simply by shouting Shazam, Billy would gain superhuman powers. His selection criteria for this successor were extremely vague: a perfectly good person. How could a human being be perfectly good? This was merely a beautiful goal, an unattainable moral standard. Shazam, once a shepherd boy, slapped his thigh and came up with this standard. It might be a ridiculous standard, but at least it was a standard. How would Shazam choose his successor? He cast a wide net, searching the world. He'd find one, see if it was suitable, brainwash him, and let him go. He'd search again, and the cycle would repeat. This guy alone had found thousands of people with lost memories, all the work of Shazam, all chosen by him as the most benevolent of men. After such an unreliable selection process, perhaps out of boredom or some other reason, Billy Batson came into his sight. The old man immediately declared him the most benevolent of men. The old man simply believed that Billy Batson, only 15 years old, had his parents murdered when he was young, yet he hadn't taken a vengeful path. He was adamant that he was the most benevolent of men. Billy Batson's childhood experience with his parents' death was indeed worthy of sympathy, but simply because he hadn't gone astray, the old man concluded he was the most benevolent of men. With a world population of 6 billion, Thea felt she could find tens of millions of such candidates. Chapter 380: Long-Term Goals. It's no exaggeration to say that few superheroes have happy families. Are Superman and Batman considered truly good people? Does Green Arrow count? Thea even feels like they fall into that category. Old Shazam, convinced he's found his heir, then, through a simple ritual, transfers the divine power bestowed upon him by the gods, along with his own imagined responsibility for protecting the world, to a child with no social experience. No life lessons were imparted, and Thea suspects the old man likely lacks any, nor was he taught how to use magic, leaving Shazam with nothing more than a fistfight with Superman. In short, Shazam, as if completing a task, ignored everything and shoved a bewildered Billy Batson out the door. Billy Batson then ran wild, showing off everywhere. His immaturity led him to commit a series of wicked acts, drawing Black Adam's attention. Billy Batson, oblivious to the pain, had completely failed to learn his lesson. He recklessly distributed divine power to his friends, even granting it to his pet, a tiger at the zoo. A magical tiger, what would the gods think of this? Thea saw it as a colossal joke. By absorbing the misused divine power into her own body, Thea felt she had done a good deed. Billy Batson was just a child, and the burden of defending the world was simply too much for him to bear. Feeling she had never acted so righteously, Thea instructed Poison Ivy to maintain contact with Billy Batson and collect as many voice samples as possible. With a number of genetic samples, Thea arrived on a planet somewhat similar to Earth. Deathstroke was responsible for gathering information about Earth's dark side, while Phyra was responsible for information on several nearby star systems. During her time with General Zod, Thyra had been responsible for contacting various aliens and gathering resources. Now, Thea tasked her with gathering intelligence and building her own forces. Thyra was incredibly skilled at these tasks. Grodd had also deployed numerous mind-controlled soldiers from the controlled planets. Combined with Thyra's superior combat prowess, she had already established a strong presence on nearby planets. Clone an Earthling, Thyra took the genetic sample, a bit puzzled, but she never questioned anything, she simply followed through. Collect deep-sea monsters within our area of influence for some experiments. Also, gather some plants to send to poison ivy on Earth. Earth's sea monsters were temporarily immobilized, and Thea wondered if alien sea monsters could be controlled as well. Thea assigned Thyra the most demanding task, gathering materials ranging from synthetic clean energy to plants, animals, and rare metal deposits. Thea possessed extensive knowledge of Kryptonian genetic engineering, and her modified cloning equipment was perfectly adapted to Earthling physiques. Unlike Lex Luthor, cloning Superman took 10 years, as Superman's genes were far too powerful. At that point, Billy Batson was just an ordinary human, so Thea's standards were low. She didn't need the clone to be incredibly intelligent, she just needed someone who could shout Shazam. Clones don't need intelligence. The voice reproduction must meet the standards of the sample sent by Poison Ivy. The closer the match, the better, Thea instructed Thyra again before returning to Earth. Earth attribute magic is so hard to find, while Shazam's situation was a long-term plan. Thea had another pressing matter that needed to be addressed. That was her own Earth attribute magic. Her goal was to achieve all the attributes, absorb vast quantities of magic, and become a god in one fell swoop. Missing even one attribute felt incomplete. Initially, she had no idea, but when Thea saw the trident of Aquaman, combined with her memories and extensive real-world data, she had found her target. It was Diana's half-brother, Hercules, the Hercules of human mythology. According to various texts, he was undoubtedly an Earth attribute deity. Hercules wasn't trapped in Ragnarok, but rather trapped in an alternate dimension. The key to unlocking that alternate dimension was the trident of Aquaman. 10,000 years ago, the Atlanteans and the Greek gods of the land united to fight the giants, descendants of ancient giants. Together, they drove the giants into a desolate alien dimension, but their resistance was fierce. At the critical moment, Hercules entered that world and closed the gate from the other side. This hero of humanity, the champion of Olympus, chose to sacrifice himself. His ideals were undoubtedly noble, his purpose truly great. But tens of thousands of years passed, and alone in the alien dimension, he battled the giants. His mind had sunk into madness, his lofty ideals gone, only hysterical madness remained. Assembling a team, recruiting people, engaging monsters, and absorbing divinity, Thea figured it wouldn't be impossible to force Hercules with more people, but now with Diana in the mix, the task became much more difficult. From killing him, the task became capturing him and restoring his sanity, a task that suddenly became significantly more complex. Thea would have to expend countless favors herself to accomplish this, and at least a usually insignificant Martian manhunter would have to be called in for assistance. In the original time and space, a doctor studying Atlantis stole the trident and broke the seal. Thea didn't intend to intervene. If Hercules were released, all the giant creatures sealed with him would also be freed. There were too many implications for any hero's reputation to handle. Thea instructed Deathstroke to find the archaeologist and secretly provide financial support to accelerate his research and encourage him to discover more Atlantean ruins. The genetic drug formulated for her parents had entered the late stages of testing. Deathstroke had recruited many loyal followers to administer the drugs, and the response was excellent. All those who received the drugs felt transformed. "Are there any side effects?" Thea asked Deathstroke beside her. They were watching a mercenary injected with the drug perform a truck lifting feat on a monitor. Thea didn't care about the power the drug could bring to humans. Longevity and a lack of side effects were her priorities. There are no symptoms of sequelae at the moment. Everyone's mentality is similar to before, except for some excitement and insomnia, Deathstroke answered very cautiously, speaking word by word. Shia looked at his expression and said casually, "Are you afraid that these people will surpass you? Don't worry, these are just primary gene potions. I have already prepared several bottles of advanced ones. If they have no sequelae, you can also inject them. The effect of the potion will directly cover the miracle you injected before, your leadership position will not change. I trust you very much. After all, you are my brother's friend, right?" Shia laughed and walked out of the basement, leaving Deathstroke speechless. Chapter 381 Jason's Death. Thea's mention of Oliver wasn't a casual remark. She had a premonition that he might reappear at any moment. 4 years had passed since the shipwreck, and her involvement had altered many things. The Green Arrow's sudden appearance didn't surprise Thea at all. The genetic test subject still needed further observation, and Thea wanted to wait for Oliver's return before gathering everyone for the injections. Otherwise, everyone would have to go through lengthy explanations, which was incredibly cumbersome. Metropolis gradually calmed down, and everything seemed to be moving in a positive direction. Thea was busy with her experiments, Luthor continued to hunker down in the shadows, planning something, and Superman, while working, performed good deeds. From fighting criminals to rescuing stray cats, there was nothing he wouldn't do, and he occasionally engaged in endearing activities with Lois Lane. The world seemed to have settled down. Sister Thea, the one rushing to the lab, was Damian Wayne, Thea's first disciple. Because of Shadow's murky relationship with Oliver, she wasn't officially a disciple, but rather a surrogate teacher. Given her solid foundation, she was ready for heroic service after a brief training. Now, Shadow and Felicity worked together every night to fight crime, leaving the only one still learning from Thea, the mischievous Damian. The two had become quite familiar, even Diana had met Damian. Thea, never one to put on airs, was always willing to engage in casual conversation with Damian. Their relationship was, in some ways, closer than Damian's with his stern parents. Thea ignored Damian's clamor, minding her own experiments. The super gene optimization fluid was nearly complete. She estimated it would be more potent than the Mercury potion Deathstroke had injected, and perhaps comparable to Captain America's super soldier serum. But the amount was too small. After all, it wasn't appropriate to constantly draw blood from Thyra. Thea was still waiting for the final lab report before she could give her parents the injections. Jason's dead. Damian grabbed her arm and shook it vigorously. Thea's eyes were fixed on the liquid in the test tube, and she subconsciously said oh. After 2 seconds, her thoughts were drawn back. Jason? The one next to Batman? Dead. Damian nodded sadly, gazing at Thea expectantly. Hey. Don't try to pin it on me. I can't bring the dead back to life. Thea knew what he was thinking. Are you kidding me? Resurrecting the dead? If I had that much power, why would I be studying potions? Damian and her had studied magic for over a year and knew the difficulty of resurrecting the dead. The level of sophistication involved was too high. He couldn't help but sigh, and his face suddenly fell. Jason Todd's views shared many similarities with Damian's. Neither of them particularly agreed with Batman's no-killing policy, making him one of the few people in the Batcave who could get along with Damian. As Jason Todd listened to Damian's story, Thea recalled the young man she had met that day, stubborn, confident, and unyielding. Now that a bomb had claimed the life of such a remarkable young man, Thea lamented. It would have been fine if she hadn't known, but now that she knew, she had to visit him no matter what. A portal opened directly to the Batcave, and Thea led Damian inside. The Batcave was filled with familiar faces, the 3 old men, Old Gordon, the old butler, and Old Fox. Nightwing, Dick Grayson, Batgirl, Barbara, Catwoman, and Talia were also standing or sitting nearby. Seeing Thea and Damian emerge from the light curtain, they nodded briefly, none of them in the mood to speak. Batman's towering figure stood alone in the shadows. Just as Luthor needed no pity, neither did Batman need comfort. Thea said nothing, simply lifting the white cloth from the platform. The body had clearly been cleaned, the blood and dust washed away, but the grime still betrayed the abuse its owner had endured. Her movements drew the scattered gazes of the others to Thea. After all, she was one of the few remaining transcendents. Even Batman, who had been standing erect, turned and gazed expectantly. His condition is very strange. I don't think he's completely dead. That's all I can say. After repeated examinations, Thea came to this seemingly plausible conclusion. Jason's heart has stopped, but his brain is still in a state of defiance. In other words, the body is dead, but the mind is alive. However, this period will be short-lived. If he realizes that everything in the outside world is over, he could die at any moment. Thea folded her arms, lost in thought. Do you have any solution? Batman asked anxiously. Thea didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out a state-of-the-art medical pod from her space ring. Gideon estimated that this pod's technology was at least 70 years ahead of Earth's current technology. Several idle people rushed in to help, wiring, powering it, and testing it. After completing the entire process, they finally placed the bruised Jason Todd inside. Scans were performed and a medical plan was developed. Despite Batman's turmoil, he forced himself to remain calm as he discussed the plan with her. The two quickly agreed on a plan. The pod shield closed, and 4 robotic arms began working rapidly. What happens next? Batman, seeing Jason enter the pod, seemed to have a glimmer of hope, and hurriedly asked Thea. But Thea didn't say what he wanted to hear. The situation is complicated. His heart has stopped beating, but his consciousness hasn't dissipated. This means he's mobilizing his remaining vital energy to stay alive. Every moment, every second, he's actually overdrawing his vitality. This overdraw is comprehensive. I estimate the chance of him waking up is less than 10%, and even if he did, he wouldn't be able to continue fighting. What about magic? Batman, who always hated the supernatural, asked bitterly. This involves what modern medicine calls consciousness, what we call the soul. Magic has minimal effect, Thea shook her head and briefly explained. As long as he's alive, that's all. Batman's voice was hoarse. Unlike the usual voice-changing device, it was his own voice. It was just that he hadn't had water in a long time, so it was particularly harsh, like a hard object rubbing against sandpaper. This time, the medical bay's operating time was unusually long, lasting a full 3 hours. There's a heartbeat, Nightwing, who had been staring at the instrument, shouted happily. But Thea and Batman both had gloomy expressions, because Jason Todd didn't sit up with his usual energy. Only a weak pulse showed that he was out of death, but still a long way from being alive. What should they do next? This thought lingered in their minds. Chapter 382 One-day trip to Nandarbet. Unlike Talia that day, Jason's physical injuries aren't difficult to repair, but his mental, or rather, soul, damage is much more difficult to treat, Thea patiently explained, fearing the others might not understand. Repairing soul damage isn't a mage's strong suit. Instead, shamans and witch doctors excel at it. Another solution I can think of is the Lazarus pool in Nandarbet, which should also restore his soul. Thea mentioned another familiar location, leaving it up to them to decide whether to adopt it or not. Batman hesitated for less than a minute before making the decision, rescue. Thea was pleased with his decisiveness. I have a friend here whose symptoms are similar to Jason's. Batman waved his hand, declaring, 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 1. Knowing Batman's taboos, Thea didn't teleport directly to the Batcave. Instead, she waited outside with Shadow. Soon, everyone arrived. Yao Fei, Talia exclaimed. Although Yao Fei was over a decade older than her, he had been trained by Talia herself, and the two of them had a close relationship. Seeing him half dead, he felt a pang of regret. Batman had been curious about Thea's friend and wanted to investigate, but now that he was connected to Talia, and Shadow, Damian, and Barbara all knew him, he gave up. Call Superman too. I'll contact Diana. By the way, do you know the Martian Manhunter? If so, bring him along, Thea said casually. Batman nearly spat out blood. Are we safe? Why call so many heroes? My father-in-law may be skilled in martial arts and cunning, but there's no need for so many people to bully him. For a few seconds, Batman thought he was hallucinating because he was worried about Jason. But seeing Thea's serious expression, not one to joke, he also became serious. I need a reason. Using the magic sword as a clue, Thea recounted to Batman the possible existence of the Three Palaces demon behind the Ninja Master. A great demon from another dimension, Batman muttered, repeating the words twice. We don't necessarily have to encounter him. From what I know, that great demon won't descend directly into our world, it requires a medium. Thea's cautiousness was consistent with Batman's usual course of action. Perhaps he still had a chance to use this incident to completely sever the connection between the Ninja Master and the demon. No need to call them, Batman interrupted as Thea picked up the phone. Nandarbet has a strange barrier surrounding it that blocks all superpowers and magic. There's no point in Superman and the others coming. Thea paused for a second, then felt somewhat relieved. It seemed she had made the right decision not to steal the sword herself. On closer inspection, it made sense. The Ninja Master had enemies everywhere, and without some protection in his lair, he would have been killed long ago. She put the phone down, feeling somewhat frustrated. Fortunately, she was quite skilled and had power armor. Even with a magic barrier, the armor's magical properties wouldn't work, but the mechanical aspects alone would still crush most opponents. Yes, Thea was also planning to visit Nandarbit. After all, she had learned so many martial arts from them, and she wanted to see this world-renowned institution of higher learning. No one had asked her to go, but if she wanted to go, no one would object. The team was quickly chosen: Batman, Talia, Nightwing, Barbara, Thea, and Shadow, a total of 6. Catwoman, who wasn't sure if she was the wife or the mistress, didn't want to bother the ninja master. Damien wanted to go too, but the others unanimously refused. What a joke. A fight could start just by saying it. Damien should just stay home. How were they going to get there? Everyone waited for Thea to open the door. Where's Nandarbit? I've never been there, Thea said helplessly, seeing everyone staring at her. It has to be a place you've been to? You need a certain impression, right? Batman peppered Thea with questions, 7 or 8 in rapid succession. Thea was speechless. This guy was using this opportunity to extract information again. You're impressive if you can analyze it, but expecting Thea to reveal it herself, that's impossible. Without answering any questions, Thea instead provided the coordinates, motioned for them to wait, and soared out of the atmosphere. South Darbit was in the Middle East, and Thea and her companions were in Gotham, separated by Earth. Her clairvoyance could see it in a straight line, but penetrating the entire Earth seemed too much of a stretch. Following Batman's coordinates, Thea quickly found a valley. But as she prepared to peer inside, she felt a mysterious energy wave blocking her view. The Ninja Master's arrangement felt different to Thea than the AIGOC's, but the effect was the same, blocking all unnatural forces. Remembering the original story, Barry Allen didn't notice anything unusual when he rescued Team Arrow in South Darbit, but afterward, his speed force was blocked at the AIGOC, perhaps due to insufficient shielding or some kind of switch. Without dwelling on the future, Thea landed on the ground and opened a portal leading directly to the outer valley. Enveloping the 2 unconscious warriors with her psychic power, she stepped through first. Exiting the portal, she began donning her power armor. Once everyone else had emerged, she released the 2 warriors' psychic powers and carried them on her back for the remainder of the journey. Shadow automatically carried her father, and Nightwing followed suit, carrying Jason. They all moved at a steady pace toward the valley. If negotiations break down, you may take action, but no killing, Batman declared, automatically walking in front without turning back. Nightwing, Barbara, and Shadow, now somewhat hesitant to speak to Batman, all nodded in agreement. Thea and Talia, each with their own thoughts, didn't outright refuse. Batman, what are you doing here? The elderly ninja master, clad in ornate attire, emerged from the shadows, seemingly oblivious to his daughter. He simply stared at Batman, who walked in front. He knew Batman's true identity, but had no intention of revealing it. My assistant is gravely injured and requires the assistance of the Lazarus pool, haha. The ninja master laughed heartily, and only stopped when Thea felt the old man was being too pretentious. I told you from the beginning, if you accept the position of Demon Chief, everyone, including me, will obey your orders. With that, the ninja master stared intently at Batman. I refuse. Batman gave him the expected and reasonable response. The negotiation broke down in just 2 sentences. Thea felt that the 2 men understood each other well, and the conversation was merely a formality, neither expected to impress the other with words. Chapter 383 Pool Water. Attack, attack, the 2 shouted simultaneously. Batman flung his darts, engaging the ninja master in combat. Hundreds of League of Assassins appeared from all around, fiercely descending upon the group. Facing the barrage of arrows, Thea raised her armor's energy shield, protecting them all. With a composed demeanor, she prepared to observe this rare clash between father-in-law and son-in-law. Even Lex Luthor had managed to invent an energy shield, so with so much alien technology to draw upon, it must have been easy for Thea, with so much to draw from. Such a shield wouldn't be much use against Aquaman or Superman, but against the ordinary people of the League of Assassins, it was a formidable threat. Powered by a white dwarf, the shield was massive and thick. The few League of Assassins soldiers at the forefront were slightly startled, but they had been trained to despise technological weapons. They swung their swords at the shield. There was no sound of metal clashing, no sign of swords breaking or shields shattering. The blow seemed to strike air, and no matter how hard they tried, it wouldn't penetrate. A few skeptics also drew their swords and lashed out, each of them stunned. Idiot, Thea glared coldly. Such ignorance was truly terrifying. It could power a city of 1,000,000 for a year, a tremendous amount of energy. To exhaust that energy with just over 100 people, each armed with a steel sword, would take at least 10 years of continuous, sleepless slashing. Those within the shield were initially surprised, but soon relaxed. Nightwing had seen a lot of advanced technology in his years with Batman, and Shadow and Barbara had known Thea for a long time. Anything she could come up with was no surprise. The League of Assassins ragtag group was helpless against the shield. Talia tensed for a moment, but when she realized the enemy couldn't get in, she finally relaxed and focused on watching her father and Batman clash. The two exchanged blows and kicks. The Ninja Master's moves were bizarre and deadly, while Batman used his intellect to his advantage, blending the best of martial arts from around the world, his moves reaching extremes of variety. Why were these two fighting so conservatively? Thea's combat prowess was no less impressive than the other two. After watching for a moment, she quickly noticed something was amiss. Both Batman and the Ninja Master were fighting too conservatively. In the first 10 moves, it was understandable that they were outnumbered by defense, but now, after 40 or 50 moves, they were still focusing more on defense than offense. This was a serious problem. By the time Thea saw them at 80, she finally understood. The Ninja Master truly loved his son-in-law and couldn't wait for him to take over his legacy. He hadn't used even a tenth of the energy he'd used against Thea that day, hoping only to lose a single move or two would allow him to complete his duties. Batman, with his wits about him, naturally saw his father-in-law's intentions. He wouldn't take over the League of Assassins, and he was also desperately defending, completely lacking any intention of attacking. As Thea watched the father-in-law and son-in-law's foolish and inept moves unfold, she understood their thinking. Actors were just slacking off without effort, and her interest in watching the show faded considerably. Just then, Batman gave her a look. Thinking quickly, Thea understood his meaning. Or perhaps it was the Ninja Master's. My energy shield can't be moved or activated. Everyone, gather your gear and head inside. Talia, you stay by my side and show the way. Save Jason and the others as quickly as possible, Thea instructed the others. 3, 2, 1, follow me. The group was still outside the barrier. Unaware of the strength of Nandarbit's barrier, Thea abandoned her bow and arrows, dispelled her shield, raised her hand, and unleashed 2 streams of icy air, swiftly breaking free from the Assassin's League's encirclement. Hurry, hurry, Thea urged them all the way. Barbara's skills had greatly improved over the past year, and her combat awareness was much better than before. Talia would lead the way, while Nightwing and Shadow were carrying people, making it difficult for them to move. The task of covering the rear fell to Barbara. Smoke bombs and batarangs were thrown continuously from behind and to the sides. In a flash of fire, the group rushed into Nandarbit. The interior was decorated with ancient architecture, blue stone paving, and torches lit along the path. Faint screams could be heard in the distance, as if one had suddenly stepped from civilized society into an ancient tomb, solemn, majestic, and filled with murderous intent. Thea was the only one among the group to casually survey the surroundings. Barbara's pressure was growing. Shadow, leaving her father in Nightwing's arms, took out her bow and arrows, knocking them with various high-tech arrows to thwart the pursuers. Talia led the group through twists and turns, freezing any random soldiers who jumped out. Here it is, they reached a wall. Talia reached out and flipped a mechanism on the side, causing a large stone to rise, revealing a pool of clear water. How is it? Barbara wiped the sweat from her forehead and asked Thea, who was studying the water. Thea shook her head. My powers are all sealed. I can't tell if there's anything wrong with the water. But the monitor inside my power armor did detect a large amount of energy in the water. Don't hesitate, throw them in at the same time. Remember that this water was influenced by the devil. Although the energy in it can repair the soul, it can also drive people crazy. Thea 1.0 in the original time and space suffered a lot. Wouldn't it be better to let 2 people share this madness? Nightwing took out the rope he had prepared in advance, wrapped it around the waists of the 2 men, and slowly let them in. The pursuers were still arriving. Thea didn't dare to use the freezing gun to seal the door, because once it was sealed, they wouldn't be able to get out for a while. She picked up a long knife from a soldier and joined the others in blocking the door and fighting. Nightwing Dick Grayson was the only male present. Though he and Barbara had broken up, their relationship still held a lingering, intermittent quality. He was now charging with unparalleled courage, his twin batons whirling up and down, his combat prowess at about 70% of Batman's, leaving a legion of League of Assassins in tears. How long will this take? Barbara soared into the air, kicking one enemy to the ground and flinging another away with her whip before turning to Thea. Thea glanced back at the pool, where bubbles bubbling like something simmering. Should be soon, Thea replied vaguely. How could she know how long it would take? She couldn't see the magical fluctuations, the energy paths, or even the enemies hiding in the shadows. She was used to the Eye of Horus, but now it was suddenly sealed. It was a strange feeling. Thea thought of the Eye of Horus when she suddenly realized her vision had returned. Her body trembled, and her magical connection was restored. Nendarbat's magic barrier suddenly vanished. Yadofei and Jason Todd suddenly jumped out of the pool. Their eyes were bloodshot, their mouths were making hoarse sounds, and their eyes were full of ferocity. Chapter 384 The Other Side of the Pool. The emerald green water didn't calm down after the two men jumped out. Instead, it intensified. Nendarbat's forbidden magic field vanished, but that didn't make Thea happy. She felt a drop of cold sweat trickle down her forehead. A vast, malevolent energy swirled from the water. Thea couldn't tell if this was the way it always was, or if Jason and Yadofei's entry had broken some kind of restriction, allowing a world filled with evil to connect to them through the water. Two mages bound Jason and Yadofei, who now looked more like beasts than humans, and tossed them to Nightwing and the others. Thea surveyed the water again. Chaotic, unruly energy seeped through the tiny gap in the water, seeping into this world. Even this tiny energy persisted, constantly swaying the combatants. A few heroes, with their unwavering resolve, remained unaffected, and the Alliance's miscellaneous soldiers, rigorously trained, showed no signs of being seduced. But Thea knew that this state couldn't last long. As the cracks in the passageway widened, more and more evil energy seeped into the world. She couldn't hold out for long relying solely on willpower. Bruce, something's happened. A passage filled with evil has been opened. You and the Ninja Master, stop immediately. I'll have everyone here evacuate quickly. I'll try to seal this place. Thea used telepathy to tell Batman, but she waited for half a minute and got no response. Did he not hear her or what? Thea was wondering, and suddenly it occurred to her that she was stupid. Batman didn't know how to telepathically. He didn't even have that skill. Just as he was about to use the Eye of Horus to check the situation outside, he saw that the power armor's communication system intercepted a new call request. Thea flipped it open, and Batman's nimble figure appeared on the communicator. Your system is quite impressive. Was it Felicity who did it? I heard you, but Master Ninja suddenly went berserk a minute ago and can't stop now. Batman flicked the camera towards Master Ninja, revealing the previously refined Elder's appearance had drastically changed, his symptoms even more severe than Jason and Yadofei's. His hands radiated a faint blood-red energy as he attacked. He's demonite. He's been immersed in the pool for so many years, his body is no longer human. Thea took only a glance, and based on the demonized nature she'd seen during the previous fight, she instantly made her judgment. Can it be restored? I don't know. I'll close the gap here first, and we'll talk about the future later. The two quickly ended the call, and Thea turned to Talia and asked, can you control these people? Your father has gone crazy out there, and we can only rely on you here. Talia has always been an ambitious woman. If it weren't for her affair with Batman, she would have nothing to do with the word justice. When she heard that the Ninja Master had gone crazy, a trace of sadness flashed across her face, but the emotion quickly dissipated, replaced by joy. I'll try. If you can help me get the old man's ring, it will be more reliable, Talia whispered. Xiao gave her a cold look and said, put away your calculations. I know your rules. Anyone who wears the ring can command them. You must stabilize them first and don't cause any trouble. There is an extremely evil world on the other side of this pool. If my seal fails, no one here will survive. Talia was not angry when she saw that she was not fooled. She raised her longsword and chopped down two enemies in succession. She jumped onto a high platform and shouted, Brothers of the Alliance, I am Talia al Ghul, the eldest daughter of the Ninja Master. Listen to me, it must be said that Talia has a high prestige in the Alliance. There were hundreds of people who defected from the Alliance and swore to follow her to death. Although the people present now may not be loyal to her to that extent, they are also convinced of her. A large number of black-clad assassins in the Alliance stopped their attacks, wanting to hear what she had to say. The Ninja Master has gone crazy, Talia said shockingly. Nonsense, impossible, you traitor, The previously quiet crowd erupted in excitement. The ninja master had disciples all over the world, and suddenly, black-clad assassins, speaking in a variety of languages, launched into a barrage of insults at Talia. However, many of these insults involved classic ancestry, so they didn't dare to include the ninja master, which made their momentum somewhat lackluster. Thea was busy carving a sealing circle. The Constantine family had been dealing with demons for generations, and they were masters of summoning and sealing techniques. Although somewhat dissatisfied with Talia's seizure of power, she nonetheless offered her assistance. A massive water mirror appeared before everyone. The figure in the mirror was none other than Batman and the ninja master, who had been fighting outside the building. The old man's eyes were bloodshot, and he uttered sounds like some kind of beast. His demeanor had completely changed, and anyone could tell something was wrong. See? He's gone mad. I'm the true leader. Sardin, do you still believe in me? Philly, have you forgotten who taught you archery? Talia used both soft and hard tactics, repeatedly stating the facts while winning over a few assassins with whom she was relatively close. The crowd's attitude quickly softened. Many of them were loyal, simply to the system. If the ninja master truly went mad, then swearing allegiance to Talia wouldn't be out of the question. Hurry, Thea was sweating profusely. She didn't know if the enemy was the three-palace demon, but she felt she had never faced such overwhelming pressure before. The enemy was clearly being held back by something and wasn't exerting their full strength to break through the barrier between the two worlds. Talia knew she wasn't bluffing and immediately ordered the group out. You go out first. I'll see if I can help. Nightwing, with the demeanor of a general, knocked out Yao Fei and Jason, then ordered Barbara and Shadow to leave first while he stayed behind to help. Thea nodded. Her concentration was now completely focused on the magic circle, leaving her no time for anything else. As Thea chanted the incantation loudly, a mysterious rhythm filled the small room, and the enemy's resistance grew stronger. The passage between the two worlds, far from shrinking, actually expanded slightly. Even in this distanced exchange, Thea could tell her opponent was significantly stronger than she was. She was fighting on home turf, and despite significant constraints, the opponent had managed to strengthen the gap. His strength far surpassed Horus's that day. She drew the Death King's staff from her special ring and released a clone. The two, in tune with each other, cast spells simultaneously, instantly halting the opponent's ability to breach the boundary. The Death King's staff also enhanced Thea's spells and shortened their duration. For a moment, things seemed to be turning for the better. Thea's eyes narrowed as she saw Black Shadow desperately burrowing through the gap, striking at her like lightning. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 The Great Demon King's Princess. The clone launched a magical missile, striking the enemy. Sia, seizing the moment the creature was unsteady, wielded the Godslayer sword and struck the monster in the chest, finishing it off. Damn it, it was indeed the Trigon. Sia examined the creature she had slain, horns, white hair, 3 pairs of eyes, and dark red skin. This must be the Trigon's son. Distress. Sia watched the corpse sink to the ground and shouted to Nightwing, he's not dead. He absorbs all the negativity in the world. We can only contain him. Nightwing, having spotted the enemy Sia had just slain, emerged unharmed from the ground. He nodded, leave it to me. With that, he engaged the Trigon's offspring with a short staff. With his help, Sia was finally able to reseal the barrier. The barrier, which had been nearly sealed, had been severely damaged by the enemy's sudden attack, and the two sides were once again in a stalemate. Unknown spellcaster across the way, can you hear me? As Thea struggled to push the other person to the other side, a faint, childish voice reached her. Who are you? Thea was scrambling to coordinate the spells of her original form and clone, while also paying attention to Nightwing's battle. The other party was constantly firing dark red energy beams, and Nightwing, a mere mortal, was truly struggling. Huh? Great. You have teleportation abilities. You're far more powerful than I thought. The one currently venturing into your world is the greatest demon in the multiverse, named Sangong. The girl's voice was visibly relieved. She had feared she wouldn't be able to respond, but now that they could communicate, their chances of success were much better. Thea showed no sign of joy. She felt completely unlucky. It had been a joyous day out, meant to rescue Jason and Yadofei and visit the farmhouse in Nandarbit, but now it had become a situation where two worlds were working together to seal the great demon. The story had changed so quickly. As expected, the person she was talking to was Raven, the daughter of the Three Palaces demon, the famously scheming beauty. Somehow, her group had interfered in her initial attempt to seal the Three Palaces demon, helping her father open a second frontier, leading to all this drama. I know the Three Palaces demon, a great demon from another dimension. My seal is almost complete. What do you mean? Thea sped up her movements, even finding time for her clone to cast a few acceleration and protective spells on Nightwing. What I'm saying is, I can't hold on any longer, the girl's voice echoed simultaneously with the sound of the barrier shattering. A dark red hand, 10 meters long and 2 meters thick, suddenly emerged from the barrier, its aura filled with searing pain and wailing. Startled, Thea nearly cursed out loud, "You can't hold on any longer? Why did you say so earlier? Why are you here too?" Thea said, speechless, staring at the girl, who is no more than 8 or 9 years old. "I'll help you. I'm very powerful," the young woman, clad in a black cape that covered her nose, spoke as she cast several restraining spells, binding the demon-chasing Nightwing. Thea nearly spat out blood. "Help me? Help my sister. Shouldn't I be helping you? How am I the one in charge? What does this have to do with me? How can logic even tell you it's helping me?" The massive hand gave one a glimpse of its true size. Pointing at it, Thea asked in disbelief, "Can't you seal this giant?" The young raven looked at Thea as if she were mentally retarded. "How could I possibly seal it? I was just stalling. It's the greatest demon in the multiverse, don't look at me like that." "I know what you're thinking," Thea was furious. The young raven glanced at her, and the two beauties, one large and one small, snorted simultaneously, turning their heads, one to the left, the other to the right. Thea watched the crumbling barrier. It was clear that without Raven's restraint, the enemy's breakthrough is accelerating. Thea knew that Trigon's strength, Superman, Diana, and the Flash combined couldn't break through. In the eyes of the Trigon, they were barely stronger than ordinary Earthlings. Ants, unworthy of his personal attack. Not to mention her own strength. If the Trigon emerged, the best strategy would be to immediately take Moira and the others and flee. The problem returned. She had to defeat it before it could emerge and seal it. The Nandarbit node had been broken, and repairing it would take time. Besides those unnamed beings, Thea didn't know who else had such a skill. Seal? Thea stared at the Death King's staff, which she had only just acquired 2 days ago. She had never understood the sealing function within it. Could it be related to today? As Thea's involvement in more and more events increased, her confusion grew. She had definitely not been involved in the original events, so how had they managed to do it? Or was the timeline with her involvement the only real one, while the others were just stories from movies and comics? She lifted her staff and gently waved it in her hand, sending streams of obscure energy into the air. "What are you going to do?" the raven asked. "Seal it," Thea replied succinctly, then leaped up, wielding the staff like a spear, and stabbed the giant hand. The staff's message to her was vague. It wasn't a failure, but a failure. "Help me hold it down," Thea instructed the raven beside her. After all, this great demon princess had been tangling with her father for so long, and even if she couldn't handle a whole person, she shouldn't have any trouble dealing with a hand. The raven raised its nose proudly, raised its arms, and a huge shadow rolled up behind it. A highly anthropomorphic raven, composed purely of shadow energy, pinned the struggling giant hand, leaving only its wrist exposed. "Hold it down, watch me." Thea already roughly understood the staff's principles. It could seal, yes, but there was a probability problem. It was impossible to seal the Trigon in one go. After all, it was only the staff of the Death King, not the staff of God. Puff, it didn't work. Puff, still didn't work. Puff puff, Thea treated the Trigon's large hand like pork, jabbing it hard again and again. The staff's sealing probability was incredibly impressive. With each poke, Gideon calculated the success rate. From Thea's estimated 20%, it had plummeted to 0.025%. "Hey, can you do this?" the scheming female raven asked. "Sure, I'll be right there." Thea was sweating profusely from her busy work. How could she know if it would work? She had to have another way. She wouldn't do this foolishly. When Gideon calculated that the probability had dropped to 0.0007%, he saw a large mass of attributeless energy suddenly gathered on the staff, rolling up the bead curtain. The energy wrapped around the giant hand, rolling all the way and rushing to the other side. Chapter 386 Seal. This energy looked familiar. It was clearly the power of rules. Like Diana's lasso and Thea's own arrow of vengeance, this staff had also been imbued with this power during its forging. However, the sealing rules were far superior to those of vengeance and truth, with higher quality and less quantity. This was the main reason for the staff's remarkably low sealing chance. This demon must be sealed completely. Your abilities are very effective against it. Come with me, the scheming Lolly Raven said cheerfully. Okay, Thea said before she uttered a word. Batman, reappearing after defeating a monster, agreed with aplomb, like a police officer. Thinking it over, Thea nodded, believing the other side couldn't withstand the power of the staff's rules, meaning the danger wasn't serious. Hearing that the other side was hell, Nightwing, having been chased for so long, was curious and wanted to follow. Raven Lolly, though she couldn't discern any magical powers from the two men, didn't object. After tying up the suddenly jumping son of the three palaces, the four of them, carrying their captive, used the Raven's teleportation channel to reach the other side. Is this hell? Thea surveyed her surroundings. A dark crimson hue permeated the surroundings, the sky shrouded in thick, dark clouds. The ground looked as if drenched in blood, the gray earth tinged with crimson, creating a particularly unpleasant scene. Help, Raven Lolly interrupted the others, eagerly saying. Even Thea, Batman, and Nightwing had seen the Trigon demon's massive form. A giant hundreds of meters tall, he resembled his sons, with horns, white hair, and 3 pairs of eyes. However, his oppressive power was 1,000 times greater, and his aura was 1,000 times more sinister. Even the slightest proximity could sense his presence, a soul-shattering evil. However, the great demon now unleashed a vast mass of unknown energy from his left palm. The energy quickly enveloped his upper body and half his head, mobilizing all his energy to counter the sealed power. Use your artifact, quick! Raven summoned another phantom crow, firmly binding the archdemon's legs. She recognized the power of Thea's artifact. She hadn't expected Earth to possess such a strange weapon. While the odds were low, it was her only remaining option. Thea observed the archdemon's legs, bound as they were. He was no fool. His upper body resisted the seal, while his lower body struggled mightily. Raven couldn't hold him for long. Watching the archdemon's struggling padfoot, Thea recalled the staff's impressive odds. She created a clone and handed her the staff of the Death King. Such a dangerous task was perfectly suited for the clone. The original body donned the Yellow Lantern ring, releasing all its emotional energy. Then, based on Raven's form, a yellow chain materialized, binding the archdemon's legs securely. Batman and Nightwing engaged the various imps and the Trinity's child, who appeared nearby. Thea and Raven also channeled their magical energy into the chain, providing them with support. Time passed agonizingly slowly, as the clone Thea continued to pounce on the archdemon's toes. The archdemon resided alone in a valley-like area, obscured by dark red mountains. Only a narrow path led into the valley. Batman and Nightwing held the entrance firmly. Thea summoned Elk to help them block the gap, while she herself drew her magical longbow, aiming at each flying demon and dispatching them one by one. Facing the ever-increasing wave of demons, Batman and Nightwing unleashed every possible means, using smoke bombs and magnetic bombs to fight tooth and nail. Amidst a haze of smoke, Batman donned a jet-black steel armor, his strength, speed, and defense dramatically increasing. Undeterred by the swarming demons, his immense strength, sturdy defense, and expert combat skills allowed him to single-handedly shoulder 70% of the demonic horde's pressure. Despite their fierce battles, the demons were simply too numerous to slay, slaying one moment and resurrecting nearby the next. Even Batman, who was incredibly energetic, began to tire. Are you done? Batmaster asked Thea, breathlessly, grabbing a demon's arm and swinging it like a weapon, smashing a bunch of demons into pieces. Almost there, the time dragged on. More flying demons swarmed towards her, forcing her to constantly dispatch them, the pressure no less intense than the two on the ground. Thea's clone, still wielding her staff, struggled with the giant demon's toes, poking and slamming them countless times. Just as Thea's original form wondered if the staff would only work once, the impressive sealing effect finally activated. The same attributeless energy enveloped the Trigon demon's toes, curling back towards them. The giant demon, who had been struggling against the sealing rules, could no longer hold out. His feet and calves were quickly sealed. Two streams of energy converged at his waist, and the demon let out a deafening roar before being completely enveloped by the sealing energy. The 100-meter giant finally vanished, leaving a crimson crystal suspended in the air. "What is this?" Ravenlolly turned to ask Thea. "You're asking me? I don't know." How could Thea know what it was? In the original time and space, this was supposed to be your job, right? You ask me, who am I supposed to ask? The two beauties, one large and one small, looked at each other in bewilderment, both a little confused as to what was happening. But the great demon king was indeed sealed away, that was beyond doubt. Raven used her dark magic to transform the surrounding mountains into a massive boulder, enclosing the crimson crystal in the center. Thea's clone, nearly exhausted, handed the staff back to her original form, which then returned to Thea's body. "I'll dig a hole." Thea gripped the staff with both hands, imitating the way she remembered the Death King Atlantis, striking the ground with a powerful blow. Boom! The staff lived up to its reputation of sinking Atlantis. It was a powerful tool for digging holes. This time, without even considering the odds, Thea herself expended no magic power. With a single strike, she created a massive hole 1,000 meters deep and 100 meters in diameter. Raven controlled a boulder to fall to the bottom of the deep pit. The two increased their magic output and filled the hole. They looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. When the demon army saw the three palaces demons sealed, most of them fled directly, and the few loyal ones were also eliminated by them. Raven led a few people back to Nandarbit, and Thea began to work on sealing this extra-dimensional passage. When she wanted Raven to help, Raven replied nonchalantly, "No, really?" Thea asked again with a bit of disbelief. Ravenlolly turned her head away and ignored her arrogantly. Another naughty child. Speechless, Thea could only do it herself, constructing the magic circle, breaking down the details, and making a few patches on the original basis. Finally, this passage to hell was blocked. Chapter 387, Accepting Another Disciple. Just as she finished her work, before she could even take a sip of water, Shadow dragged her to see Yagofe and Jason. After their soak in the pool, the two men had recovered from their vegetative state, their minds still utterly confused. Barbara and Shadow had no choice but to tie them up and wait for Thea, the knowledgeable one, to come and see them. After a quick inspection, Thea wanted to show the scheming Lolly Raven a second. "I don't know any of that. My magic powers are all mine from birth." Raven glanced at them pretentiously, shaking her head in confusion. She was truly envious. Born with immense magical powers, Thea now felt more and more that this world was a world of cheaters, and that few could master the art of magic as painstakingly as she did. The great demon king's princess declared she could easily blast enemies' trash, citing her extensive practical experience, but lacking theoretical knowledge, leaving Thea to draw her own conclusions. Their souls were previously damaged, but now, thanks to the pool's water, they've been fully replenished. However, this is a replenishment, not a repair. A fierce conflict will ensue between the original and newly replenished souls, leaving them confused for a while. Once their own souls devour the foreign souls, they should regain consciousness. Thea explained their assessment to the others, unconcerned about their understanding. She tapped each of them with a finger, knocking them unconscious. No one could help with this soul fusion, she had to rely on herself. Having dealt with the two men, Talia brought a group of people to bring the demonized ninja master to see if he could be saved. The once tall, thin old man's eyes were now bloodshot, and a hoarse sound echoed through the air. 4 or 5 people were barely able to restrain him with chains. Such a great man, to meet such a fate, what a pity. Thea lamented. She used her mental power to sense the old man's soul and then channeled her magic throughout his body. "Can he be saved?" Batman and Talia asked simultaneously. However, their thoughts were different. Batman had great respect for his mentor, and although they had been enemies many times, neither had ever come to blows. Talia's feelings towards her father were much more complicated. There was resentment, jealousy, fear, and a bit of father-daughter love, but more of a desire for the old man to die quickly so she could take over the Assassin's League. Facing the complicated looks of the two, Thea roughly thought about the methods she knew and shook her head slightly. He is different from Yaofe and Jason. His demonization is too deep, and this physique cannot be eliminated, but it can be suppressed, Thea said. drawing a few mysterious symbols on the Ninja Master's forehead and arms. The Ninja Master, who had been like a beast, instantly calmed down and fell into deep sleep. Thea looked at Batman. My spells can calm him. If you want him to regain consciousness, you'll need more restraint. You can ask the AOM for some of their forbidden metal and make 2 bracelets for him to wear. He'll regain consciousness, but he can't stay in the pool anymore. Optimistically, I estimate he only has 10 years left to live. Batman pondered for a long moment, then nodded. He couldn't just stand by and watch the Ninja Master die. But even the slightest thought revealed how difficult it would be to obtain anything from the AOM. The forbidden metal was a powerful weapon against those with superpowers. Knowing Amanda, Batman couldn't get it without paying a heavy price. But as a righteous hero, he couldn't resort to stealing or robbing. Batman began to consider his own options, figuring out how to obtain them. Seeing that everyone was alright, Thea finally breathed a sigh of relief. Turning to see the scheming young woman watching him. Are there many people like you in this world? Raven's question was rambling, but Thea knew she wasn't asking about her appearance, but about how many people knew magic. Probably not many, Thea admitted. Aside from a few immortals, who in modern society could wield magic without some sort of cheat? It had great potential, but until it was fully developed, it was no more powerful than a submachine gun. The Dark Lolita was a little embarrassed, her face tangled as she said, "Can you teach me? I'm a quick learner. I'm going to teach another apprentice." Thea had considered absorbing the Dark Lolita's magic, but unlike Shazam, hers was inherited from the Three Palaces demon, a naturally potent malevolent aura that she couldn't control without some blood connection. Thea examined Raven, who looked at her nervously. "By the way, how old are you?" 9, Raven Lolita said, her expression a bit like "I'm an adult." Thea nearly burst out laughing. This little girl, scheming, dear, and quite the scoundrel. Thinking about it, she had a lot in common with Thea. And unlike Billy Batson, she was also beautiful. So, appearance really does determine destiny. "Okay, you can stay with me for a while." Thea didn't say it firmly, but she had already agreed. Unlike Damien, Raven possessed immense magical power, but she was afraid to use it, fearing the dark forces within. In the original time and space, she had been holding back, without any guidance, and had wasted a mage with immense potential. The thought of that pained Thea. Actually, there were some techniques involved. With a little guidance, Raven's power would skyrocket without any side effects. While magic schools are rare in modern society, there are still a few. Spells have shifted from rough, explosive styles to refined, minimalist ones. Modern magic is best suited to situations like Raven's, who possesses vast magical power but poor control. A few outsiders watched from afar, seeing Batman and Talia whispering to each other. Finally, he sighed helplessly and slowly walked towards them. Talia turned around and returned to the League. Alice, Talia had ultimately given up her man and son for power. Thea sighed. She had no say in Talia's choice, but she felt she was a ruthless person. Or perhaps, after so many years in the League of Assassins, the organization's importance was paramount to her. "Let's go." Batman's voice was as steady as ever. Perhaps, with his expertise in psychology, he had already foreseen Talia's ambitions. Thea had no objection. This trip to South Darbat had been a whirlwind of activity, but she had gained nothing, save for figuring out the function of the Deathly Hallows staff and adopting a little lolly. A portal to the outskirts of Gotham and another to Star City opened, and the group waved goodbye. Thea led the Dark Lolly and Satoyo Fei through the portals and returned to Star City. "Your teleportation technique is good, but the total amount of magic power is a little less," Lolly said a little arrogantly. After that, she opened a dark portal for herself and raised her eyebrows to Shia in a show-off manner. Chapter 388, Shocking Changes, added for Mr. Horatio. 3 black lines crossed Thea's forehead. This child was so unlovable. "Your portal is shaking too much, and the landing point is unstable." She was now experienced in dealing with naughty children. She started to scold him, saying this was wrong, that was not right, and she took advantage of Raven's weakness of having almost no basic knowledge. She found 4 or 5 faults and completely dispelled Raven's arrogance. But she didn't just suppress him blindly. She also praised him appropriately, making the little girl grumble at first, then cheer up again. "You have good taste." The arrogant Raven took off his hood, revealing a slightly pale face, and kept observing the crowds on the street. "I think your father needs some rest." He should be able to recover in about 2 months. In any way, Shadow and Yao Fei's relationship was closer than hers with Jason. Before leaving, Thea checked old Yao again and then took Raven back to her home. Finding Damien practicing with his sword, Thea introduced him to Raven. "Here, I've got a mission for you. Tell this little girl everything I taught you." With a chutzpah, Thea gathered the 2 children together and headed back to her room to shower and get ready for bed. Even from a distance, she could still hear the 2 children's chatter. "You little one, you can do magic." Raven was the only one who wouldn't treat bean buns as solid food. "What? Stop looking down on me. Do you dare to challenge me?" With the sound of a sword being drawn, Thea knew it was Damien, a master of both magic and martial arts. Thea didn't bother to listen to the children's bickering. Raven and Damien were both very measured and wouldn't let things get out of hand. She was confident of that. 2 months passed in a blur. Jason Todd, young and with a strong will to live, regained consciousness earlier than Yao Fei. Learning that Batman still adhered to no-kill policy and hadn't avenged him, he left Gotham alone, looking depressed. Old man Yao Fei was far inferior. In terms of age, experience, and potential, he was no match for Jason. Thea treated him again midway through his treatment, and he finally woke up within 2 months. Father and daughter embraced and cried. When he learned of Thea's abilities, he was also shocked, similar to Deathstroke's reaction. He hadn't expected Oliver's sister to be so powerful. Although Raven considered Thea's magical power merely acceptable, to the average person, it was incredibly powerful. Father and daughter reunited for a few days. Yao Fei was delighted to learn that his daughter now had a job and a purpose in life. One morning, he left Star City alone, leaving behind a letter. Oliver hadn't appeared as expected, and Thea couldn't ask Amanda. She had to pretend she didn't know he was still alive. Oliver had wandered off somewhere, and she was overwhelmed, quickly distracted by other matters. Thea had been in Metropolis for a week straight. As a prominent entrepreneur in Metropolis, and perhaps even in the United States, she had an incredible amount of social engagements. Often, she could use a clone to attend meetings while her real self slept at home, but there were also times when her real self was absolutely required. For example, this meeting was an internal one, the National Security and Superman-Related Affairs Committee. This wasn't a tea party where Superman was invited to chat and gossip. It was a small, targeted meeting where a group of people, behind closed doors, were contemplating how to deal with him. Whether as a government hero or a prominent entrepreneur, Thea had to attend this meeting. The sun shone brightly outside, but deep underground, the walls were lined with lead to prevent Superman from hearing. Dizzy, Thea listened to a general speech on the stage. What if Superman flies into this room and captures one of us? Will he abide by the Constitution? Does he understand our democracy? Do we have the means to protect ourselves? The impassioned general didn't expect any answers. His speech was incredibly long, but it boiled down to this: weapons must be developed to counter Superman, or else he, who had fought for his country for half his life, would have sleepless nights. Thea had no memory of this man, but seeing how his calves cramped with fear, he must be a bad person, guilty of many evil deeds. She wouldn't even spare a second thought if such a man died before her eyes. Just as she was debating whether to have Chinese or Western food after the meeting, she felt a strange beam of light sweep through her. Someone's out to get me. Thea's languid expression flickered to alertness, but 2 seconds later, she realized the meeting was proceeding normally, and no one around her noticed anything unusual. Few people in the meeting room understood her true strength, but there were a few who did, including General Ryan, an old acquaintance of Thea's and the anti-Superman pioneer. Seeing her suddenly alert, the old man panicked, unsure of what was going on, and gave her a questioning look. Thea was bewildered. She was certain the strange energy she'd sensed was correct, but she wasn't sure what it was. She wanted to see the outside world, but the lead in the wall blocked her view. Desperate, she pulled out her phone, intending to ask Diggle, the black bodyguard who was guarding the area outside. No signal, Thea exclaimed softly. Several people, including General Ryan, who had been staring at her, also pulled out their phones. They glanced up, and their eyes all expressed the same thought: why is there no signal all of a sudden? The paranoia was no less intense than Thea's, and they had a single thought in their minds: Superman knew they were in a meeting to discuss him, and he'd come to kill them. The glances from these prominent figures created a tense atmosphere in the room. A businessman from a consortium, who had been lecturing on the stage about the dangers of Superman, suddenly shut up and looked cautiously at the audience. A few who were slow to react also noticed the loss of cell phone signal, and panic spread among the elite group. "Shut up, everyone. Come with me and see what's going on," the voice came from Lex Luthor, an old acquaintance of Thea's. But before he could act, the conference room door was flung open, and a swarm of bodyguards in suits, guards in military uniforms, and secretaries in business attire rushed in. Luthor's secretary and Thea's bodyguard, the black man named Diggle, were among them. Not daring to delay, the crowd jostled for position as they rushed out. "What's going on out there? Is that guy in the red cape here?" someone impatiently asked his bodyguard, while everyone else, including Thea, listened intently. The bodyguard, noticing numerous prominent figures he'd only seen on television, were staring at him, and he slurred his words as he recounted the situation outside. "There's a giant glass dome in the sky covering the entire city. No one's communication equipment can receive a signal. You'll know the exact situation at a glance." Chapter 389 The whole story. Glass cover? A bunch of people were confused as to what it was and hurried out to see it. You really don't know until you see it, and you'll be shocked. When everyone came outside, they immediately saw what the bodyguard called the glass cover. They saw a sky blue cover standing on the outskirts of the city, boundless and without end. A few people looked up at the sky, but as far as the eye could see, they could only see the top of the cover was vaguely obscured by the clouds. It should have been working hours in the city, but at this time everyone was stunned by the sudden change. A large number of citizens took to the streets. Those who were slow to react were still looking at the sky, and those who were quick to react were trying to make calls, but no matter how they fiddled with their phones, there was no signal. The crowd was immersed in an atmosphere of confusion, and no one knew what was going on. Mr. Mayor, the city's power supply seems to have been cut off. The current capacity can only last half an hour. General, the military is unsettled, the gas company can't be contacted, and the city's heating system will soon be paralyzed. The Anti-Superhuman Committee represents the current elite of Metropolis, encompassing members of the political, military, and business sectors. News kept coming in, leaving several leaders utterly bewildered. Crucially, they had no idea what this scene meant. They didn't know, but Thea had already guessed 70% to 80% of it. The inexplicable energy beams, the huge glass cover, invisible to others, but her eye of Horus was not limited. Beyond the glass cover were numerous glass artifacts, all depicting various cities. Combined with a massive robot passing nearby, Thea gritted her teeth. What bad luck. This was Brainiac's collection room. It wasn't that the robot was enormous, but she and the others, including this city of over 10 million, had been shrunk. The enemy's beams instantly reduced the size, followed by a spatial displacement. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Thea couldn't take off. She could only conclude she was on an alien spaceship, but whether it was in the solar system was hard to say. Fortunately, Gideon's main program had been placed inside her power armor, shielded by a dimensional ring, preventing Brainiac from detecting it. Otherwise, facing Brainiac, a peak-level AI, not only Gideon at this point, but even the sentient Gideon aboard the Waverider would have been no match. With his everlasting consciousness and knowledge of the entire universe, Brainiac was, in a sense, an immortal god. Gideon couldn't be released, as he would betray her without further ado. It wasn't without reason that high-tech planets across the universe forbade the development of AI. Brainiac treated lesser AIs the way Thea treated ordinary humans. He had a firm grasp on them, readily devising 100 ways to deal with them. Initially, several government and business leaders, believing it was a military experiment, grabbed General Lane's sleeve and spat in his face. The old man's repeated explanations finally dispelled their suspicions. "Everyone, does anyone know what's going on here?" General Lane asked, seemingly gazing at the crowd, but more importantly, at Thea, the only person with supernatural abilities present. The old man did not take the initiative to talk about Xia's ability. It was not difficult to guess what he was thinking. If the situation gets to the worst, let Xia rescue himself first. If Xia's ability is revealed at this time, a lot of people will want to be rescued, and it will be troublesome to decide who to rescue and who not to rescue. There is no need for him to increase his competitors. Several people who hold the same idea as him also stared at Xia with bright eyes. They all have similar ideas. Let's ensure their own safety first and talk about other things later. Xia was considering her words, but she did not speak. Luthor on the side did not intend to miss this opportunity to show off. Go to my laboratory. My equipment has detected a ray, but the specific effectiveness still needs to be analyzed by experimental equipment. Luther raised his wrist after he finished speaking, indicating to everyone the black technology equipment he was carrying. Of course, Thea couldn't sit there with him, so she cleared her throat. Mr. Luther, there's no need to go to your lab. I'll tell you right now. Waiting for everyone's attention to focus on her, she continued, the entire city, have been atomized by some kind of radiation. Atomized. The businessmen and politicians didn't understand what this meant, but Luther did. His expression was stern to the extreme. The secretary sitting next to him also gave Thea a complicated look. Luther's previously calm demeanor finally took on a hint of panic. This field was too niche. While he had dabbled in it a little, he was still far from mastering it. His brilliant mind raced, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Thea snorted softly at this. She didn't really understand the subject, but she had all the information in notes on the atom. Atomizing people and then restoring them was the atom's expertise. In terms of intelligence and talent, Ray Palmer was certainly inferior to Luther, but Luther's research was vast and extensive, while Ray Palmer focused on a single area. In terms of the depth of his research in the atomic field alone, Ray Palmer far surpassed Luther. Miss Thea, come with me and talk. General Ryan and several high-ranking officials, aware of her abilities, forced Diggle, the black bodyguard, aside, as if to engage in a fight, and pulled Thea aside to speak. The black man had served in the military for many years, and although now retired, he still had a conditioned obedience to the generals. Seeing such a powerful figure as General Ryan shove him aside, he was confused as to why the old general suddenly exerted such force, and stared at the others from a distance, somewhat bewildered. Is there any way I can get out of here? I have to report to the minister. Yes, I have to report to the president too. I have to report to Congress? The men asked, hushed voices, surrounding Thea. What a bunch of rats. Thea despised them inwardly, but kept silent. She carefully felt the flow of her magic power and found it perfectly fine. Although she didn't know where she was now, she wasn't worried at all. It was simply within the confines of this universe. The lantern ring allowed her to traverse the universe, and the artifact bow and arrow could travel through time. She couldn't empathize with the old men's feelings. Everyone, don't worry. Listen to me, Thea tried to calm them down. Old man Ryan was relatively safe, but one high-ranking official was practically collapsing. It'll be troublesome, but I can get you back, she offered them reassurance, and sure enough, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Their demeanor calmed. Their legs stopped shaking, and their teeth stopped chattering. But I just said it, and in case you didn't hear clearly, I'll say it again. We, including this city, have been atomized. Do you understand what this means? We're the size of atoms now. The city isn't a canopy, it's a solid glass dome. Thea's words struck like a hammer, their faces instantly darkening. Chapter 390 Taking the Initiative. Thea ignored their smirking faces and continued, I sent you back, and you're still in your current state. This is the power of science, not myth or magic. You can't report to the minister or the president because you're too small. They can't see you, the phone is as tall as a mountain in your eyes. You're probably only slightly larger than a microorganism. Ants are countless times larger than you. Do you still want to go back? Thea looked at them with a half smile and continued, your families are all in the city, right? General Ryan's daughter, Councilman Harry's mother and son, and Ms. Emily's husband. They can't all survive as microorganisms. A silence fell over them. There was one more thing Thea hadn't mentioned, but they all knew it, power. If they were reduced to this state, all rights would vanish. After all, the military couldn't obey a general who could only be observed under a microscope, and the same could be said for several government officials. Voters couldn't go out with high-powered lenses to watch them give speeches. Do you have a way to restore our original state? Someone asked Thea. First, I need to find the wavelength that shrinks us. Then, using the isotope principle, I'll set up an inverse matrix. This will stimulate the atomic structure. In modern quantum mechanics, there's Ehrenfest's theorem. Alright, we get it. Several people quickly interrupted Thea's long speech. None of them cared what the hell quantum mechanics said, they just wanted to restore the status quo. Unfortunately, the arguments were a bit too loud, and the rest of the group, including the bodyguards, leaned over to hear what they were saying. Thea was secretly pleased. Where did her prestige come from? Isn't it the ability to turn the tide in times of crisis? This incident was perfect, The Atom's theory could be used to resolve it without revealing any superpowers. Everyone, listen to me, today wasn't a formal meeting. Thea wasn't wearing her tacky business suit. Instead, she wore a distinctive V-neck white shirt, a navy blue skirt, and strappy high heels. She had put away her lazy demeanor, and her whole body was like a sword. Her cold eyes glared at everyone, and those who met her gaze fell silent. As I said earlier, all of us, including this city, have been atomized. We need to maintain order in the city and then find ways to save ourselves. An old man in the crowd hesitantly asked, "Will Superman come to save us?" Xia almost gave the old man a word of admiration. 10 minutes ago, you were still urging Superman to abide by the Constitution. You were going to develop weapons to deal with him, and now you're thinking of Superman when you have a problem? Pick up the bowl to eat, put it down and curse. This person is really thick-skinned. Can Superman take care of all your affairs? When a house is on fire, Superman will go to put it out. Because of Superman's existence, we no longer care about the source of the fire, because we have Superman. We don't have to obey traffic rules when crossing the road. Superman will come to save people, and we will definitely not be killed, because we have Superman. Everyone, I didn't see Superman today, we can only rely on ourselves. Thea looked at everyone coldly, and sparse applause rang out at the scene. This group of people have not completely abandoned their moral integrity. After all, they all came to the anti-Superman conference. Now they expect Superman to save them when something happens. That's too ironic. Even the conceited Luthor clapped his hands reluctantly. Between being rescued by Superman and dying, he might choose to survive for a while, but now it has not come to a life and death moment. He agrees with what Thea said, but it's a pity that he didn't say it himself. Actually, Thea wasn't lying. She hadn't seen Superman in the city. She'd seen plenty of familiar faces, like Lois Lane, who always appeared wherever danger arose, the wife of the black man next to her, the young woman from the AOM, Leela Michaels, and her own subordinate, Poison Ivy. But Superman, sorry, she hadn't seen any. Miss Quinn, do you really have a solution to this situation? Luthor asked, a little incredulous. It's not a sure thing, but here's my plan. To boost their confidence, Thea explained her deatomization process and principles. The group of politicians and generals looked as if they were listening to a mystery, their expressions like, but Luthor truly understood. Although Thea didn't discuss the details, he knew the plan was feasible and based on technology derived from Earth's current level of technology. This irritated Luthor immensely. He could explain Superman's superiority to him, saying it was because they were aliens. But now, Thea, an Earthling, was outdoing him in his strongest field, science. He couldn't stand it. Too proud to lie openly, he only understood about 40% to 50% of Thea's theory, wondering if there were any areas where he could improve upon it. Luthor calculated, trying to find flaws in her theory, to save his own face. But Thea wasn't about to let him off the hook. Mr. Luthor, I've heard you have exceptional scientific expertise. Do you think there's anything wrong with what I'm saying? Luthor placed his fingers on his temples. If you were in a wheelchair, he could play a younger version of DRX, but even with his rapidly racing brain, he couldn't find a flaw in Thea's theory. Faced with Thea's questions, he felt like he was being pushed to the brink. His mind was churning, and based on his own knowledge, he could only conclude that Thea was completely correct. As for improving it, or even taking it a step further, that was just wishful thinking. No matter how smart he was, it would take him a year or two to reach Ray Palmer's level. Luthor's smile was uglier than tears. I'm fine. Miss Quinn's theory works. Several people who knew him murmured in confusion, looking from Thea to Luthor. Luthor, relying on his intelligence, treated these politicians and generals like mentally retarded children, his sarcasm and ridicule routine, his occasional dry jokes leaving them feeling utterly baffled. Now, he had publicly acknowledged Thea's theory's validity, yet offered no new ideas himself. What did this prove? It showed that Thea's scientific research had its merits. If the timing hadn't been wrong, they would have pulled Thea aside to discuss the new weapon. They were fed up with Luthor's constant displays of superiority. Thea felt incredibly satisfied watching the silent Luthor. Physical destruction wasn't a skill, defeating an opponent at their strongest point was the real sense of accomplishment. As for the fact that this knowledge came from the Atom and did not belong to her, Thea didn't care. No one would expose her anyway. Moreover, at this point in time, the Atom was still wandering around. so no one had any objection to saying that it was Thea's theory. Chapter 391 TV Speech. After a brief delay, the city was already in chaos. Everyone, first, gather all your available men and restore order in the city. Don't let those people take advantage of the situation and loot. Then, restore power. Connect all electrical equipment to Quinn Group's new energy source. Use traditional methods to broadcast television and radio signals to calm the citizens. Gather the city's scientists to work with me on designing the de-atomization device. And finally, if possible, we must seize this spaceship. Thea decisively assigned the tasks on the spot. As for Luther, who always loved to be in the spotlight, she automatically assigned him to the scientists' camp. Her first few suggestions seemed feasible, but when they heard about the counterattack on the alien spaceship, everyone was stunned. We're on an alien spaceship, can we defeat the aliens? I'm not a soldier. I'll handle the logistics. The crowd was clamoring like a market. Even the bodyguards were a bit flustered. For example, Thea's bodyguard, the black man named Diggle, had his eyes wide open, his mind a mess. Thanks to Hollywood, the idea of aliens these days is all about spectacular special effects. The bodyguards honestly didn't think their tiny pistols could kill an alien, especially with Superman as a living example. When they finally calmed down, Thea explained, aliens are living among us. Isn't that strange? You don't think something as bizarre as shrinking a city is the work of some mad scientist on Earth, do you? Everyone shook their heads, skeptical of Earth's advanced technology. Some angrily muttered, if it was an Earthling, beat the shit out of him. You're also panicked, let alone the ordinary citizens. That's why I have to stabilize the situation before I start broadcasting. Does anyone have a better idea? The leaders looked at each other. They had the right to compete for leadership, but they also hoped Thea would save them in a critical moment. So, they wisely chose to wait and see. The rest of the group was stunned by the news, completely unsure about leadership. Luther had some feelings for this leader, but his previous defeat had weakened his spirit. He observed the silence of several prominent figures, and, not knowing the inside story, chose to wait and see. The assembled bodyguards, over 200 in total, were asked where to go first. Thea decided to head to the National Guard base. Power was out, cell phones were blocked, and the entire city seemed possessed by a demon. Dark thoughts quickly surfaced in many hearts. As soon as they arrived on the streets, they witnessed several robberies and murders. Kill them if you see them, this was Thea's strategy. With the mayor of Metropolis absent, the deputy mayor and several council members hesitated, then fell silent. The bodyguards for this group were all exceptional marksmen, and they dispatched every bad guy they encountered. Arriving at the military base, they encountered another obstacle. The station's officers insisted on a Pentagon transfer order before allowing the troops to leave. General Ryan spat in his face. Where could he find the Pentagon in this place? Finally, the old general, another lieutenant general, and 3 major generals jointly signed a letter of guarantee and submitted it to the garrison officers, finally securing command of the garrison. Assign half your troops to suppress the unrest in the city, and the remaining half to guard the armory. Thea's orders were concise and to the point. However, there were always those who feared death and sought to seize advanced weapons and ammunition during the chaos. These individuals were difficult to guard against, with some colluding with others and others openly robbing. Thea had to be on guard. The police station's command was secured smoothly. At the deputy mayor's command, just like in a military camp, half the troops took to the streets, while the other half guarded the armory. Veterans occasionally joined the group, and General Lane even managed to bring his daughter into the fold. Thea indirectly questioned Lois Lane, the suicidal student, and as she had suspected, Clark Kent had returned to his home in Kansas on leave and was indeed out of town. It seemed Superman wouldn't be around for the time being. Thea, what happened? Layla Michaels, the wife of Big Black and Amanda's assistant to the AOP, found the main group and, leveraging Big Black's connections, squeezed in beside Thea and whispered. In their original time frame, her first marriage to Big Black was short-lived. Big Black's pride made him unable to tolerate his constant gigoloing, so they parted ways amicably. It wasn't until Big Black infiltrated Team Arrow that they remarried. Now, with Thea employed, Big Black is doing quite well. Both Amanda and Layla rely on Big Black to maintain contact with Thea. While their lives still have some bumps in the road, their tolerance is much higher than in their original time frame. Thea could only whisper her story again. Halfway through, Lois Lane, citing the journalist's right to know, joined the audience. Aliens, are we on an alien spaceship now? Layla's receptiveness was far greater than that of the other high-ranking officials. She made a snap decision and stayed by Thea's side. The black man, unaware of her thoughts, assumed his wife was seeking his protection. His masculinity suddenly surged, and he patted his chest, promising to protect her. Stabilizing a city of millions was no easy task. They had managed to quell the chaos by nightfall. Those who were too impulsive were killed, and those with ulterior motives chose to wait and see. Thea first restored communications within her own ranks. Luther launched a small satellite over the city, setting up a special channel to temporarily relay communications. Several of the city's main power lines were also connected to the Quinn Corporation. The power plant, located on the outskirts of the city, couldn't reach them, so the city relied on a new energy source developed by Quinn. Using the Daily Planet's broadcast studio, Thea addressed the entire city. Her reputation in Metropolis had proven effective. Most people knew Thea as a young, compassionate billionaire. You may or may not know me, it doesn't matter, but please listen carefully to what I am going to say next. Many people have questions. Where did the electricity go before? Where did the communication signals go? Where did the city water supply and gas go? Let me tell you, we were abducted by some evil alien creature. We were all shrunk by an extremely advanced technology and then locked in a glass cover. Yes, you can see by looking up now. It's not some special metal, it's the $2 glass cover we bought in the market. All of us have been shrunk. The shocking remark stunned everyone who listened to and saw her speak. Even a few robbers who were clamoring to rob a fortune stopped their actions. This was beyond everyone's expectations. If we were all shrunk by aliens, what was the point of robbing money? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Assignment of Tasks. A homeless man preparing to steal from a burger shop listened to the radio alongside a salesperson. Several masked robbers, armed with rifles, joined the bank clerk, listening to the horrifying news. A truck driver parked his truck in the middle of the street. The city was engulfed in darkness, and he no longer had to make deliveries. Small shops also closed, expecting no one to come today. Teachers and students at the school, doctors and patients at the hospital, all fell silent. A few psychopaths were silenced, leaving Thea's voice alone over the city. She allowed everyone a few seconds to digest the news before continuing. The evil aliens miscalculated. They underestimated the ingenuity of us Earthlings. A group of scientists and I are working hard to discover a way to restore us and the city to normal. Just give us a little time, and we can all return to normal. Thea's voice suddenly rose from its low pitch, stirring the hearts of the city's residents. While many remained skeptical, their previously subdued moods finally calmed. From the Daily Planet livestream, faint cheers could be heard from certain quarters. Thea smiled with satisfaction. She smiled, but others were utterly displeased. Lex Luthor had never imagined he'd see the day he'd be automatically assigned to the group of scientists. He, the mighty Lex Luthor, the smartest man on Earth, had fallen to such a state. It filled him with hatred, and he longed to bite Thea's ever-smiling face. But no matter how much he hated her, scientific research couldn't be a one-shot success. If you can do it, you can, and if you can't, you can't. He'd worked so hard, his hair falling out with anxiety, but he was only just getting started in atomization. To catch up with Thea, who was backed by Ray Palmer, would take at least a year at best. So, while Ray Palmer might be a bit of a nerd, he was also a highly intelligent one. His intelligence wasn't as good as Luthor's, but the gap wasn't that big. Even the 25th century scientist, Reverse Flash, praised him. How could Luthor possibly catch up with someone who'd been working for over a decade just by cramming? Please remain calm, citizens. The law still exists. The military and police are already on the streets. I have the authorization from the legislature to execute all troublemakers on the spot. Just be patient for 2 days and maintain stability in the city. I promise to send everyone back to Earth. Thea was just trying to make a big deal out of it. Where could she find the authorization from the legislature? However, strict laws were indeed needed to protect the lives of the majority of people, especially those in power within the House. Without the law and without power, they were nothing. Old Man Ryan had secretly mobilized the army, and in peacetime, he could have executed people on the spot. He was already feeling uneasy, but now that Thea was once again blaming the legislature, he felt a sense of relief. After concluding her televised speech, Thea returned to reality. She still had to lead a group of scientists in their research on deatomization. Thea's words brought Luther, who was absorbed in his studies, back to reality. Mr. Luther, how many spacesuits do you have, huh? Luther's mind was so full of formulas and theorems that he had almost forgotten his last name. It took him a long time to realize she was calling him. He hadn't expected to hear the mention of spacesuits out of the blue, but he answered truthfully. Over 300, Thea nodded, facing the puzzled looks. Quinn Corporation has over 100, and if the city departments could collect, there might be several hundred more. Everyone still didn't understand why he was bringing this up, but Luther was quick to react. Are you saying the oxygen content on this ship is different from Earth? He hadn't really considered the oxygen issue. It wasn't that Luther was stupid or Thea was brilliant, but Luther had always lived on Earth, and his mindset hadn't adapted to space combat. Thea, on the other hand, was different. She'd fought her way back and forth at the origin wall, and she was capable of vacuum survival, so it was natural for her to consider this issue. Yes, Mr. Luther is right. We don't know where we are, and Superman won't come to save us, Thea said, sarcastically looking at the old man who had previously pleaded for Superman's rescue. I don't think this ship is very large, and I'm not sure if the oxygen inside is suitable for us Earthlings. If all goes well, the personnel who restore the ship to its original state shouldn't be too numerous, and they must be combat personnel. This is the only way to successfully capture the ship. Luther realized he'd overlooked something and pulled some kind of instrument from his pocket to begin calculating. No need to check. I've calculated. This glass cover, using some kind of special knowledge, is also drawing oxygen from our city. Now that we've shrunk, our oxygen consumption has also been reduced exponentially. The oxygen inside the glass cover should be enough for about 10 days, Thea said slowly. Damn it. Luther calculated, and it was indeed as Thea had said. He was completely speechless. He was now one step behind. He hadn't taken Thea seriously at first, but now her status in his heart had risen steadily, no longer the dispensable heir to the upstart group. The heavy words 10 days echoed in the hearts of everyone in the room. My task is to stabilize the city, search for scientists from various disciplines, and select combatants. I estimate that the ray emitter will be manufactured within 3 days. Then we can seize the spaceship first and talk about other things later. Xia assigned tasks to these useless senior officials, and then took Old Man Ryan aside to talk. Luther wanted to hear what they said, but was stopped by 2 fierce guards under the old man. Why? The old man was puzzled. Do you know who the enemy we are facing is? Xia asked. Old General Ryan shook his head. Xia was not going to keep him in suspense. It is an extremely evolved artificial intelligence. It has destroyed countless planets. Superman's planet was destroyed by it. The old man seemed to be listening to a story at first, but when he heard the last sentence, his face changed drastically. He didn't understand alien space warfare, but it was not difficult to guess the strength comparison between the enemy and us, especially with Superman as a benchmark for strength measurement. The old man, unaware of the yellow sun, combined the identical appearances of Superman and Earthlings and automatically imagined a planet populated by 6 billion men in blue tights and red capes, flattened by a shadowy figure. Holy crap, he exclaimed. What a powerful enemy this time. He was initially skeptical, but then he considered the fact that they'd taken a city without anyone noticing, a tactic only heard of in fairy tales. His legs shook like noodles. And he was speechless with fear. Thea, unaware of the old man's associations, would have scoffed. 6 billion Supermen? Are you dreaming? With such a powerful force, 6 billion Supermen would send even God packing and running. Chapter 393 Preparing to Depart. If Brainiac, whose true form is still in the depths of the universe, knew that Superman's father-in-law thought so highly of it, he would be so happy that his lubricant would drip out of his mouth. Thea didn't know why the old man's face suddenly turned pale. After waiting for a few seconds and seeing that he didn't show any symptoms of fainting, she breathed a sigh of relief. Right now, this spaceship is just one of the spaceships it has spread out into the vast universe. Its true form is still in the depths of the universe. If we want to seize this ship, we must intercept its outward communication signals. Do you understand what I mean? Thea repeated her intention. The old man just breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't understand a thing. Seeing his confused face, Thea could only explain it again. Is artificial intelligence so powerful? The old man asked Thea uncertainly. Yes, the development of artificial intelligence is prohibited on all high-tech planets in the universe. I remember I told you at the Ministry of Defense, right? We must intercept this spacecraft signal immediately. This step can't be done by machines, but manually, and covertly. I need all the hackers under military control to do this. No civilians, this must be kept secret. The old man finally understood Thea's general strategy and felt it would be easy. He had already mobilized the garrison, so adding a few imprisoned hackers would be no problem. After sending the old man away, she directed the government officials outside. Power supply was restricted, and food and drinking water were distributed on demand. In short, everything was carried out according to the disaster prevention plan. Finally, Thea brought in a group of scientists, including Luther, to study the detomization problem. Initially, the scientists were skeptical of her leadership, but they were stunned by her rippling theories. Luther could at least understand 40% to 50%, and their understanding of 10% was a sign of their solid theoretical understanding. Copying the atoms theory was fine, but applying it in practice presented significant challenges. The atom suit was simply atomized, so giving each person a suit wasn't feasible. Simplification was necessary. Even returning to Earth, how to restore Metropolis was a challenge Thea faced. After a night of toiling, they finally finalized a plan, with Luther contributing numerous ideas. He proved to be a very trustworthy figure in times of crisis. By dawn, the blueprints were finally complete. The scientists were exhausted, and even Luther's brilliant brain couldn't handle the exhaustion of the night, so he lay on the ground with his eyes wide open. These guys are in terrible shape. Tisk-tisk, although Thea hadn't rested all night, her physical attributes were 1,000 times higher than those of the average person. She could sustain this level of physical exertion for a year without rest, which was why she had been able to simultaneously master so many subjects and achieve remarkable results in each of them over the past few years. Leaving the scientists to rest, she went outside to gather materials. Hey, the guy with the glasses, collect 3 copies of everything on this list. You bald guy in the corner, take 2 people and remove the transmitter from the rooftop across the street. Several high-ranking officials were resting, and no one dared disobey her orders. She dispatched countless people to search for the items. Fortunately, Metropolis was an international metropolis, and in times of crisis, no one would cross her. All the requisitions and transfers were ultimately paid for by the government. Thea herself was also busy, directing technicians to install equipment, debug circuits, and program control systems. To avoid arousing suspicion, she took a half-day break, leaving the on-site work to Luther, who had recovered somewhat. In this world, even in neighboring Marvel, anyone who relied on technology, whether heroes or villains, built their own equipment and possessed exceptional machining skills if they didn't want to reveal their true colors. Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne here, Tony Stark next door, were all no exception. These guys could easily become technical backbones in unspeakable countries, their machining skills exceeding the proficiency level. Thea slept soundly, and when she woke, the equipment was more than half assembled. Have we broken through the ground? Thea approached Diggle, the black bodyguard. Deatomization couldn't be carried out within the glass enclosure, they had to get out. But they couldn't just pierce the glass enclosure. The air outside was unfit for human life, even a small opening would mean the end of tens of millions of people. Thea's solution was to deploy a massive containment chamber in the center of the city, drilling from the inside, piercing both the Metropolis floor and the table where Brainiac stored his collection. This kind of work was the Quingcore forte, and the entire city's construction crew was mobilized, working day and night on it. We've broken through the ground, but we're almost there, the black bodyguard replied with a wry smile. Tens of thousands of people working in shifts, battling a broken table for a whole day and night, was something he hadn't imagined a day before. Worried, Thea went back to the scene to take another look. From her perspective, the scene was truly shocking. It looked like a bottomless hole had been bored into the earth. But those in the know understood that it was essentially a small hole drilled into a wooden table, the thinnest of sorts. Drilling the hole and assembling the detomization device took another day. That evening, Thea gave another televised address, essentially announcing that the equipment was ready and that anyone interested in fighting the aliens could sign up at the Daily Planet building. Initially, the citizens were thrilled to hear the equipment was complete, but Thea's next words instantly calmed everyone down. What a joke. The first people to be restored were going to fight the aliens? In the movies, aliens look like idiots, but in reality, no one is stupid. Aliens are definitely better than us. Half a day passed, and over a dozen people from the larger city had signed up. No one was vying for the chance to be restored first. Everyone opted to let others fight the aliens. This was exactly what Thea had intended. The chaotic citizens refused to obey orders. They were just going to be wasted if they went out. It was best for them to stay inside the glass enclosure. 300 individuals were selected from the military, bodyguards of various political figures, and agents of the Eye Society, led by Thea, as the first group to leave. Thea hinted that Poison Ivy and the others were hiding in the crowd and were not brought along for this mission. Her Eye of Horus had already observed that the ship only had a single-tracked robot on board, and that Deathstroke could kill it in a fair fight, so there was no major danger from the outside world. Her operation was largely a show. General Ryan had found 12 hackers for her to infiltrate the 300 people. Their mission was to manually intercept any signals from the ship. Take care, everyone. The 300 people boarded 3 C-17s and flew from the cave entrance to the ground. Chapter 394 Shia and the 300 Warriors. The mission team members bid farewell to their families and friends. 3 planes, loaded with hope, flew fiercely into the cave entrance. It looked truly magnificent, especially as they passed through the basement and tabletops of the metropolis. The surroundings were shrouded in darkness, like a plunge into hell. Deep within the caverns were many bizarre, shimmering creatures. Thea led the charge, the flash of her tail guiding the 2 following planes. Fearing they might scare the group, all 300 men were assured that nothing they encountered along the way was a threat. It was just the eye of a table, not the gate to hell. Those creatures were merely parasites and microbes. It looked scary, but it was only because we had shrunk. Hey, are you scared? A bodyguard asked a nearby soldier. The soldier's teeth were chattering with fear, but how could he truly admit it? He'd talk about Captain X in the future, saying he'd wet his pants after being frightened by a table. How could he possibly live like that? No, the soldier gritted his teeth. In reality, most people on the 3 planes were terrified, but the atmosphere was so strange that no one had the courage to admit their fear. After 10 minutes of mutual inquiry and encouragement, they finally passed through what they would later jokingly call the dark portal, which was actually just the wooden board of a broken table. The planes shook slightly, due to the different air content inside the spacecraft and inside the glass enclosure. Fortunately, all 3 planes had been modified and tested beforehand, and they finally landed on the ground an hour later. Everyone stepped out of the planes in their spacesuits. Thea first assigned a few hackers to intercept the spacecraft's signals. Thea then pushed the de-atomization device out of the plane. Who's going first? Thea asked. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Seeing no one respond, Thea knew they still didn't believe in this technology only seen in movies. Then I'll go first, afraid that she would grow larger and crush them. Thea ran a long way alone before shouting, "Go, Diggle!" The black man aimed his probator and pressed a button on the device. A beam of orange, almost transparent light shone upon Thea. Thea suddenly grew larger in front of the 300 people, until even if they tried to look up, they could only see her calves. They knew the device had succeeded. Leave 100 to guard the machinery and the entrance, 200 to begin de-atomization, and I'll go seize the ship. Everyone hurriedly began their radiation baptism, while Thea looked around. Brainiac had a considerable collection of items. This was just one of his countless ships. Over 20 bottles contained large cities from intelligent planets around the Milky Way. Some still showed signs of life, while others were completely silent. Can all of these be liberated? Lex Luthor asked, pointing to a pile of glass bottles. He was the only non-combatant besides Thea willing to come down. Everyone had a communicator in their spacesuits. Thea pondered his question for a moment. Perhaps, leaving Luthor alone to ponder over the pile of glass cases, Thea began assigning tasks. She couldn't claim she'd already conducted reconnaissance. With only one enemy aboard, the necessary search procedures still had to be carried out. The spaceship wasn't small, and it took a full 50 soldiers to cover all the routes. The remaining 150 prepared their weapons and awaited further information. The gravity inside the spaceship was less than on Earth, but it wasn't a vacuum, so everyone needed a brief adjustment before they could engage in combat. "Commander, I saw a green tracked robot at the entrance to K2. It moves, and it looks like an enemy. These routes were named by Thea, and the soldier who had found the target was unsure and reported vaguely. Thea instructed him to continue tracking and hold off for the time being. After half an hour, when the remaining 49 routes were clear of enemy activity, Thea felt the show was complete and led the main force to the K2 route mentioned by the veteran. In this world, with the Superman vs. Zod battle, ordinary Earthlings have become much more accepting of aliens, but the first sight of the ship's owner still startled them. Is this an alien or a robot? The thought crossed many minds. Thick tracks provided its locomotion, and its body was densely packed with wires and mechanical bearings, giving it the overall appearance of a giant insect. Countless robotic arms and data cables extended from its torso. Its head was shaped like an inverted triangle, and two infrared eyes scanned the surroundings. It spotted us. Attack. Thea knew bad things the moment she arrived on the scene. These soldiers had little knowledge of high-tech weaponry. A quick glance at the on-site detection radar revealed 4 or 5 types. The enemy had already noticed they were being followed and were clearly waiting for them to fall. Intelligence AI was too much trouble. Thea didn't participate in the battle. She contacted the hackers first. Are there any signals going out, Commander? We've intercepted 14 signals, 15 now. The dozen or so hackers must have suffered numerous setbacks at the hands of the military, their rebellious natures largely eroded. Keep intercepting. Let me know when you can't hold on. Thea said nothing else. If interception truly failed, she had no other options. Gideon didn't dare to use his weapon, so now they had to rely on the hackers to simulate the spacecraft's signals and manually intercept them. To deal with the reckless aliens, yet also to avoid damaging the ship, everyone except Thea and Luther was armed with rifles. Over 100 M4A1s opened fire simultaneously. Amidst the roar of flames, the robot calmly activated its energy shield. A hail of bullets slanted onto the shield, creating waves before vanishing into thin air. Use grenades, Thea continued to command. Over a dozen soldiers carrying grenade launchers simultaneously took aim and pulled the trigger. The flaming grenade struck the robot's shield, the explosive force sending a shower of electric sparks swirling around its body. It was clear its shield was struggling to withstand the onslaught. Pop! Pop! The humans feared damaging the ship, but the robot had no such concerns. Fire flashed beneath its tracks, and 4 rockets blasted out, aiming directly at the crowd. Simultaneously, its robotic arms transformed rapidly. In a dazzling display of movement, they transformed into barrels as thick as a child's arm, from which 2 faint blue lasers shot forth. Diggle, use the freeze gun. The freeze gun was incredibly difficult to make, so Thea only made 3. Moira and Felicity, 2 of the less powerful, each received 1, and the black man, her bodyguard, also received 1. As long as it wasn't used frequently, the radiation wouldn't be too significant. The black man was thrilled to be back on the battlefield, a sense of mission bringing through him. His tall frame rolled forward, then sideways, gradually approaching the robot. As the soldiers on the other side drew the robot's attention, he suddenly leaped out, cocked the freeze gun, and aimed forward, unleashing a burst of spray. Chapter 395, Rain of Bullets. The robot, extremely sensitive to energy, immediately determined Diggle posed the greatest threat. It quickly swung its guns, aiming at the soldiers, but it was a step too late. A torrent of icy gas sprayed the ground beneath its tracks. Its body was protected by its energy shield, but the ground beneath its tracks was no match for it. The absolute zero freezing air visibly froze several meters beneath it. Shoot. Keep firing. Its energy shield won't hold out for much longer, Thea praised the black man's combat acumen. Losing its mobility, the enemy was a mere target. 100 or so men would surely kill it. As if not wanting to let his men take all the credit, Luther winked at the secretary who had followed him. The secretary pulled a number of parts from a massive backpack behind her. Her movements were incredibly swift, and her deft hands combined dozens of components into a bizarrely shaped weapon in less than 30 seconds. The secretary lifted the dark weapon with a powerful grip, its 2 parallel rails flashing with dazzling lightning. An electromagnetic cannon? An electromagnetic gun? Thea instantly grasped the weapon's mechanism and nodded slightly. The secretary took aim, waited a second for the electromagnetic field to activate, and then suddenly pulled the trigger. Even with her powerful dynamic vision, Thea could only discern a black cylinder, propelled by the electromagnetic field, crashing fiercely into the robot's shield. The cylinder, propelled by the immense kinetic energy, illuminated the shield with a vibrant orange glow. A second of stalemate ensued. The robot continuously supplied energy, but its area defenses were severely compromised by this type of point-to-point attack, even though its total energy far surpassed that of the electromagnetic cannon. With a single click, the electromagnetic cannon pierced the shield, and the cylinder's residual force slammed directly into the robot's torso. Unfortunately, having previously penetrated the shield, its kinetic energy had been depleted, causing no damage. However, this was enough. The crowd's ammunition rained down on the robot, and the AI launched a disparate counterattack, using infrared targeting, motion capture, and a 360-degree firepower. Few who caught its eye survived. The black man, wielding a freezing gun, flung a grenade. Instead of exploding, it transformed into a vast net swirling with arcs of electricity. This net, inspired by Black Manta's use of the massive net to pound Aquaman, was particularly effective against tougher enemies. The net enveloped half of the robot's body, the instantaneous arcing puncturing its numerous intricate and delicate components. Dougal continued his desperate charge, destroying one of the robot's launch tubes with his freezing gun, but he was also wounded in the arm and forced to retreat. The secretary was also in a tough spot, being pursued by laser weapons and missiles. Her agility was remarkable, as she maneuvered and dodged desperately, finally escaping the robot's maximum range. The price she paid was the destruction of her electromagnetic cannon and a gash in her shoulder. As for Mr. Luthor, upon commanding her to fire, he ran in the opposite direction to Thea's side. The two smiled at each other, each beaming, their thoughts only known to them. Without the need for their supervision, the soldiers and bodyguards on the scene fought bravely. After all, this was an immobile enemy. With over 100 people against one, the momentum couldn't be any worse. Send jamming messages. Thea instructed the hackers to create some trouble for Brainiac. A torrent of useless information was frantically flooded into the robot's receiving system. Hundreds of windows popped up every second, garbled emails, incomprehensible installation packages, and a tangle of nonsense that was more like viruses than anything else. This tactic was useless against low-level AIs, as they couldn't speak the same language or use the same encoding methods. But it was perfect against Brainiac, who scanned every planet he landed on, and could decipher the junk information. Although Brainiac quickly intercepted the information bomb, it still consumed some of its computing power, which manifested in a 20% slowdown in aiming and firing. The soldiers seized the opportunity, firing hundreds of guns simultaneously. The opposing robots showed no sign of weakness. Despite a damaged launch tube and being harassed by spam messages, their firepower remained undiminished, unleashing a barrage of laser beams upon the soldiers. For an AI, there's no such thing as marksmanship. They locate their target, mimic its movements, fire, and once the heat reaction subsides, they move on to the next target. If it doesn't, they continue firing. Thea, watching from behind cover, offered no assistance. This was just one of the countless billions of clones Brainiac had scattered across the universe. Perhaps to maintain a balanced energy balance, this clone possessed the lowest computing power and the weakest weaponry. Even such a low-end robot could render Metropolis's elite troops miserable, sweeping across the universe and annihilating Krypton. Brainiac truly lived up to his reputation. The Black Man and the Secretary's space suits were damaged, but their breathing apparatus was intact. After a brief bandage, they rejoined the battlefield. The freezing gun and the Secretary's reassembled railgun played a crucial role in the diversion. Yes, diversion. The two weren't fools. They knew the other side had a sophisticated attack priority system. Their advanced weaponry already attracted significant aggression, so they naturally didn't dare to take the lead. After a few attempts at coordination, the Black Man and the Secretary developed a certain tacit understanding. They exploited the robot's energy sensing mechanism, one attacking from the south and the other from the north. One would draw the robot's attention, while the other attacked from the opposite direction. The robot's weapon spun 360 degrees twice, unable to determine which was the more threatening. This rare opportunity was seized upon by the soldiers, who unleashed a barrage of bullets. Grenade launchers continued unabated, unleashing incendiary, armor-piercing, and sulfuric acid rounds without regard for their properties. The robot was truly remarkable. Facing the barrage, it remained composed, taking the bullets head-on. Its grenade launchers selectively activated some of its energy shields for defense. However, the sheer number of attackers riddled its body with holes. The robot's internal artificial intelligence began frantic calculations, discarding damaged components and replacing them with new ones from within the original body. Its weapons and defense systems reassembled, and it reassembled amidst the hail of bullets. Unfortunately, a tiger was no match for a pack of wolves. Each time it regrouped, its size shrank by a third, its original 5-meter height quickly reduced to 3, then 2, then 1. Finally, after 9 minutes of fighting, the robot's tentacles were completely broken, and its inverted triangle-shaped head was finally blasted in half by a grenade. Its orange-red electronic eyes flickered twice before finally going out. Over 30 of Xia's soldiers were killed, with only a few injured. The enemy's attacks were so deadly and swift that, save for a few skilled fighters, most were doomed if targeted. The battle ended, but for a while, no one dared to emerge, wondering if the robot was still alive. Chapter 396 Return. The scene remained silent for a full minute before a few brave soldiers approached, searching among the robot wreckage for any loot. "Miss Quinn, aren't you going up to take a look?" Luther, standing far from the battlefield, asked Thea beside him. "Mr. Luther, please go first." Thea refused to go. She could tell the living from the dead at a glance, but without Gideon scans, she couldn't be sure if any of the machines were still alive. While Thea herself wouldn't go, she could command others. "Abby, cut the red wire on the arm fragment beneath your feet. Joe, do you see that iron box-like thing in your left hand? The faint yellow glow inside must be the power source. Take it down. Pearl, that thing at your feet is dangerous. Kick it away." Drawing on her extensive knowledge of mechanical engineering, Thea, from a distance, pretentiously directed the group through binoculars as they dismantled the wreckage once more. No one objected. In their eyes, Thea was a quintessential scientist, and directing from afar was perfectly natural. They had no idea that Thea, a scientist, could instantly defeat 100 or 80 robots of this caliber. In the eyes of the soldiers, Thea was a beauty, a wealthy woman, a scientist, and a leader. With all these laurels, they didn't expect her to be much combat effectiveness. Her willingness to stand by them through thick and thin was truly invaluable. Everyone was completely captivated by her command, and no one complained. Weapons systems, communications systems, energy supply, are these enough to be dismantled? Mr. Luther, what do you think? Thea commanded through her telescope, dismantling the already shattered robots even further. She muttered a few words before turning back to Luther. Now that everyone was on the same page, Luther naturally wouldn't contradict them. He observed carefully and offered a few suggestions, all of which Thea accepted. She and Luther were similar. Assembling robots was difficult, but dismantling them was easy. The scientific principles were fundamentally the same. Even Brainiac, no matter how powerful he was, couldn't generate electricity with love. That much was certain. With the sole enemy eliminated, the group searched the spaceship twice more, confirming there were no more enemies. They then returned to the collection room and selectively pulled out over 300 more people. General Lane, determined to stabilize the situation in the city, gave his daughter the chance to recover. Having experienced a day trip aboard a Kryptonian spaceship in her previous time frame, Thea had disrupted this one. Now aboard an alien spaceship, this was arguably Lois Lane's first encounter with an alien civilization. She explored and explored everything, filled with curiosity. 70% of the dignitaries had returned to normal, congratulating each other and secretly vowing never to return to Metropolis for some frivolous anti-Superman convention. Over a dozen scientists were also pulled out. They were all incredibly excited about their first encounter with an extraterrestrial civilization. Their discussions focused on the spacecraft's power system, hull materials, and energy weapons. The entire procession was silent, save for the chatter on the intercom. Thea initially refrained from interrupting, but eventually, she explained a few things similar to current technology on Earth. She'd seen more spaceships than the scientists had ever seen living people. This ship was technologically advanced, but it was only above average for the universe. Earth was so remote, Brainiac wouldn't have used any advanced craft to reach this region. Thanks to the success of detomization, the scientists had accepted Thea as one of their own and were eager to learn from her. 3 correct answers, 4 incorrect, the rest nonsense. Thea addressed their questions with a flurry of questions, leading the way to the main control room. This was Enter Foresight. It was a location discovered by a few military hackers following the signal source. Pretending to be unfamiliar with the ship's operation, Thea took out a tablet and recorded any text on the ship. She followed the scientists, guessing and using suggestion. Through continuous brainstorming and the combined wisdom of their colleagues, they finally produced a simple operating manual for the ship. First, adjust the oxygen level on the spacecraft to Earth levels, and then see how that synthetic food is made. We've grown bigger, and there won't be enough food. Look where we are, in the Milky Way. How fast is this spacecraft? Thea scrambled to find a box and sat on it. She was now more adept at commanding others. A bunch of scientists and politicians had no idea what to do, but no one complained. They each racked their brains, analyzing the ship's functions based on the operating manual. The oxygen problem was easy to solve, just set it up according to Earth standards. When the environmental tests showed it met Earth standards, Thea was the first to remove her cumbersome spacesuit. For others, it was life-saving equipment, but for her, it was just a prop for acting, and she didn't want to wear it for a second. Seeing her exemplary leadership, everyone else followed suit. When several leaders heard there was no food on board, they took the trouble to arrange for a few soldiers who hadn't recovered yet to bring them food from the glass case, which they would later enlarge for them to enjoy. Thea didn't have time to worry about them. She was reviewing the ship's flight logs. Even a cursory glance told her the ship had already left the solar system. How far are we from Earth now? Thea could understand most of the text on the ship without the aid of her lantern ring. It was basically a universal language. Luther hadn't had that experience, being a pure Earthling. But he was also quite remarkable, possessing a photographic memory. He had memorized every symbol, and even guessing, he could understand about 60% to 70% of the text. Seeing Thea frown, he quickly whispered. Thea glanced back at him, hesitated, then told him the truth. According to the flight logs, converted to Earth's distance units, it's about 1.5 light-years away. Luther fell silent. While 1.5 might not seem like a large number, the solar system's diameter was only 0.003 light-years. That was an insanely long distance. This ship can't possibly take us so far in a flash, right? Does it have a warp transport system? Space re-entry, or something like that? Several high-ranking officials were celebrating with champagne in the distance, while pragmatic scientists were nearby studying the ship's construction. A portly old man with round eyes was now a bit dazed by Thea's words. Professor Stein, Thea spoke first. This portly old man was none other than one of the Firestorm duo aboard the Waverider. However, at this point, he wasn't Firestorm yet, he had only just met Thea yesterday. Thea was initially surprised to find this physics expert at the metropolis, having only heard he was attending some seminar. Professor, you're right. This ship does have warp transport technology, Thea reassured them, then changed the subject. However, during the warp transport, the ship's designers designed it for a robotic body. This means that passing through a black hole would instantly generate a tremendous overload. According to human strength, we wouldn't be able to withstand it. Thea handed the group her tablet. Here are my calculated overloads. It's estimated to be 200 Gs, and our pilots can only withstand 9 Gs. Chapter 397 Return to Earth. Some watched her deductions, while others lowered their heads to calculate on their own. Thea scratched her head. This ship could exceed the speed of light, and ignoring energy consumption, the return flight would take at least a year. The tens of millions of people inside the glass enclosure couldn't wait a year, and the ship couldn't fit even a million. The only option now was a space jump back to the solar system. However, only Thea could withstand the powerful overload, and displaying such impressive physical prowess in public would inevitably expose her abilities, which didn't fit her plan. What should she do? Thea, like a group of scientists, fell into deep thought. The difference was that the scientists were mulling over how to get home, while Thea was contemplating how to continue the show. After much deliberation, she decided to keep her identity a secret and contact the nearby Green Lantern Hal Jordan, asking him to help get the ship back to the solar system. Just as she was about to put her plan into action, she heard the suicidal Lois Lane yell, "Superman's coming! Superman's coming!" The crowd around her was filled with excitement, asking questions like, "Where's Superman? How did you know he was coming? Are you guys connected?" Thea was speechless at this sight. Lois Lane and Clark Kent were so close, yet none of these obtuse metropolitans had even connected Clark to Superman. She was at a loss for words. But Superman's arrival was a good thing, at least it saved her from wasting her favor. Opening the Eye of Horus, Thea glanced outside the ship and caught sight of Clark, dressed in a blue suit and red cape. His brow furrowed, His lips pursed tightly, revealing the man's desperate efforts to rescue his wife. "Clark, this is Thea. The ship is under control. Please enter through the rear entrance." Thea had initially planned to discuss the plan outside, but realized Superman was no different from Batman in this respect. He couldn't communicate telepathically, so she had no choice but to let him in. "Superman's here to save us. We're saved." Everyone on the spaceship erupted in excitement upon seeing Superman arrive, which made Thea a little disheartened. Remember, these weren't just ordinary civilians, they were mostly government military personnel, and 60% of them were the kind who'd piss their pants at the mere mention of Superman. With their support now so strong, it must be said that Superman's reputation had reached peak value. "You're also unhappy, aren't you?" Only Lex Luthor spoke with such sarcasm. Deep down, he'd rather just fly back to Earth and accept Superman's help. Initially unhappy, he caught the glimmer of displeasure on Thea's face. It was an expression he'd made repeatedly over the past year, the kind where his efforts weren't enough to earn him as much accolades as Superman simply wave his hand. Sharing this plight, he felt a sudden sense of balance. Luthor pointed his chin at the crowd of Superman, saying, "Perfect aliens, possessing godlike qualities. People only worship strength, disregarding wisdom and knowledge." Thea remained non-committal, feigning ignorance as she explained the situation to Superman. Superman fully understood her concealment of her true identity. He saw it as common practice on Earth, as did heroes like Thea and Batman, one identity in normal life, another in combat. It wasn't a big deal. After hearing Thea's story, Superman replied without hesitation, "I'll push the spaceship." "Can you do that?" Thea asked telepathically. Superman couldn't respond directly, so he nodded slightly. Thea thought, but she had no better plan. She could only use the lantern ring to replenish his yellow energy. Instructing Superman to prepare in space, Thea began calibrating the position. Brainiac hadn't taken Earth seriously, and its coordinates weren't stored on his spaceship. Thea had to calculate Earth's location. Superman, like Diana in his original time and space, possessed the ability to travel through space, yet both had remained confined to Earth for decades. Superman's swift arrival this time was only possible thanks to Lois Lane's locator, otherwise, even if he searched the universe to death, he might not have found it. After calculating his bearing, he ignited the engines and launched the spaceship, sending a massive tail of flames as it sped towards Earth at the speed of light. Superman waited for a moment until the ship reached its maximum speed, then pushed the tail with both hands, leveraging his own flight ability to provide an immense thrust. 3 days later, when Thea announced they were about to enter the solar system, cheers erupted from the crew, with more praise for Superman than for Thea. They wondered if Thea hadn't sent a clone with the yellow lantern ring to recharge Superman's energy, pushing the ship faster than light, and Superman would have been exhausted. To help Thea conceal his secret and avoid appearing weak, Superman stayed away from the spaceship for 3 days, returning directly to Earth after entering the solar system. Several key members of the anti-Superman committee, unaware of the true story, grew even more wary of Superman's immense physical strength. Enter Earth's atmosphere in 3 minutes, begin decelerating. Thea trained all the scientists to become spacecraft pilots. Several men in their 50s and 60s, accustomed to her command, hurriedly began preparing for the landing. Upon entering the solar system, Luthor was the first to establish contact with Earth, having launched his satellites into Jupiter's orbit. Shortly thereafter, several military leaders and Thea received feedback from their respective satellites. They each contacted their superiors and, fortunately, a nuclear attack scenario was avoided. Thea's superior was, of course, Comrade Moira. She probably knew her abilities. After a week of silence, she wasn't particularly worried about her. She simply said she would meet her on site with a surprise. A surprise? What the hell? Thea was puzzled, but she didn't have time to think. Before the spacecraft even entered the atmosphere and landed, Defense Minister Admiral Swanwick impatiently boarded the spacecraft on a special plane. "Is the ship intact?" The Black Minister immediately convened a small meeting with several people. Before they even sat down, he eagerly asked. The meeting was truly small, with only 4 people, including Thea, all of whom knew her true identity. In response to the Black Minister's question, the generals all turned to Thea. There was no way they could do that. They didn't have Luthor skills, learning a foreign language completely unrelated to Earth's in the blink of an eye. That was too much for these old men. The damage isn't significant. The weapons and propulsion systems are all intact. However, I don't recommend the military dismantle it. Why? The Black Minister asked. Puzzled. This is Brainiac's ship. It's only been temporarily blocked. I can't guarantee there are any other communication devices within. Remember, it's the top-notch artificial intelligence that has destroyed countless planets. Its technology is far beyond our comprehension, Thea said cautiously. The Black Minister was completely frustrated. The Kryptonian ship had been nearly shattered to dust the last time, and the military had been busy for a year without any results. Now, finally, they had a fully intact ship, but they couldn't move it. But he was still unsure and asked, is that Nyack you mentioned really that powerful? Yes, the guard on the spaceship this time is just one of its countless clones. We sacrificed more than 30 warriors to kill it. It can make tens of billions or even trillions of such robots. Once it gets serious, no planet in the universe can withstand it. Shia had to break the fantasy of these people. If Krypton couldn't stop it, it would be even more impossible for the Earthlings. Chapter 398 Oliver returns. The Black Minister was also scratching his head, but ultimately had to put the matter aside until Metropolis was completely restored to its original state. The world media had gone wild the week they'd been gone. They couldn't hide the disappearance of such a large city, and the other major powers, while ostensibly concerned, were actually watching with glee. Thea thought for a moment, called the Black Minister aside, and whispered something. What? There are aliens in this spaceship? How many? Admiral Swanwick was taken aback. His shabby minister job wasn't exactly a happy one, constantly surrounded by aliens. Anyone who didn't know would have thought he was in charge of Earth and alien affairs. Thea roughly counted the over 20 glass domes, containing the same number of alien cities. While many had perished due to environmental factors, a few resilient alien races had managed to survive, simply lacking the necessary atomization equipment. About 100,000, Thea said uncertainly. Seeing General Swanwick's bloodshot pupils and trembling lips, Thea continued to explain, these are all cities captured by Brainiac's spacecraft. I've looked and found life forms in our nearby star system. They're all intelligent, with technological levels comparable to ours. No, this is too big a matter. Even the president can't make a decision. I'll report it. Let the people responsible handle it. The minister thought about it, realizing the complexity of the matter. He couldn't make a final decision, he had to report it. Thea had no objection. Shattering the glass cover without any explanation, killing hundreds of thousands of aliens, seemed a bit cruel. Others aside, Superman had been on the spacecraft. If he knew Thea and the government had killed hundreds of thousands of aliens, he'd be furious. The Black Minister didn't dwell on it. He simply felt that killing hundreds of thousands of intelligent beings on a single order was unethical. But leaving it alone wasn't an option either. He'd leave it to the higher-ups to discuss how to deal with them. Thea had no idea her casual remark would prompt the president to convene a meeting of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council overnight. A vast gathering of advisors, international experts, and 4 more leaders gathered behind closed doors for 7 days, deliberating whether to execute, deport, or detain. Ultimately, they couldn't come to a decision. Of course, that was a story for another time. Thea was incredibly busy at the moment. The AI had easily taken the city, and she wanted to return it intact. This required a massive amount of calculations, taking into account city plans, spatial coordinates, and the angle of deatomization. The scientists on the spacecraft, including Luther, weren't enough, so they urgently summoned renowned scientists from around the world to perform the calculations. Old acquaintances of Thea's, including Dr. Silas Stone of the Red Room Laboratory and Reverse Flash and Cisco of the Advanced Technology Laboratory, were all coerced into helping, willingly or not, by various organizations. After a day and a night of hard work, they finally produced a result. Connect to the glass dome of Metropolis, coordinates confirmed, no-fly zone, activate space stabilizers and stabilizers. After a flurry of complex instructions, Thea checked everything until it was correct before issuing the final order. Activate the anti-atomization ray. Unlike the anti-atomization equipment they were researching, the ship's built-in ray was at least 200 years more technologically advanced. A multicolored ray shone into the glass dome, instantly initiating a spatial displacement. The displacement coordinates were calculated by Thea and the others. The once empty plain was instantly filled with skyscrapers, the dirt replaced by asphalt, and an artificial lake suddenly appeared on the plain. Millions of citizens were completely unaware that they had been restored to their original state. Aside from a few zoo animals whining and screaming, nothing seemed to have happened. Everyone watching on the monitors was thrilled. Yet, Cisco, having been drafted in, was a little excited. He looked for someone to high-five, but found the room full of elderly people. The only three young people were himself, Thea, and Lex Luthor. Luthor wore a long face, as if everyone owed him money. Cisco didn't dare provoke him, and gently clapped his hands with Thea, as a kind of celebration. The city had been restored to its original state, though there were some minor flaws. Thea noticed at least a 5-meter deviation in the city's sewer pipes, as well as a slight misalignment in the various oil and electricity lines and suburban roads. But these weren't her concerns. She'd let the metropolis government handle them. Thea, shortly after exiting the spaceship, they saw Moira, and mother and daughter embraced warmly. "Come and see who this is," Moira beamed as a young man stepped out from behind her. Thea, the young man was composed and stern, yet even the joy of meeting a family member was evident. "Oliver," Thea was genuinely surprised. This wasn't an act, this was genuine surprise. With her composure, it would have been difficult for her to show such an expression, but after a day and a night of calculations, her mind was still a little dizzy, and suddenly seeing Oliver in the flesh, she couldn't help but show her emotions. "I missed you so much," Thea hugged Oliver tightly. The memories of her childhood and youth had been deliberately diluted, not buried. The emotions were real, the family love was genuine. For a moment, Thea's emotions overwhelmed her, tears welling in her eyes, and she regretted not helping Oliver sooner. The family of three embraced and cried. Many scientists on the spacecraft, as well as citizens who had come to express their gratitude upon learning of her recovery, watched silently. The image of a strong, intelligent, and compassionate girl captured everyone's imagination. She was the epitome of the everyday American hero. Calm and composed, commanding with confidence and a human touch, the crowd applauded the family of three. What a shame for her talent, she's a woman after all. Coincidentally, Luthor's family of three also included a family of three. Although he too wanted to be in the spotlight, he was a 30-year-old man and couldn't possibly cry like Thea, hugging his mother and brother. Luthor, disgruntled, led his mother and sister away. Oliver had been back in the United States for 2 days. He had also learned the news that his sister had saved the city. He was filled with pride, but still felt awkward being watched in such public by so many people. He quickly pulled his mother and sister and left the scene right after Luthor. Oliver had no idea about the troubles his sister had been up to in recent years. As soon as his brother showed up, his name instantly appeared on the desks of many people who knew the situation. The government, including the Pentagon, copied all of his information from Sky Eye to assess his future achievements and influence on Thea. Several heroes such as Superman, Batman, and Martian Manhunter were collecting information about him through different channels. Several subordinates, some neutral and some evil, such as Poison Ivy and Grodd, gathered to listen to Deathstroke tell the story that he and Oliver had to tell. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 Oliver's Experience. Oliver was unaware that his every move was drawing attention. As the family left the scene to board their flight back to Star City, they spotted the dark-skinned Amanda from afar. Thea knew the Dark Woman was repaying her huge favor, so she could only nod her head in acceptance. Though unenhanced, Oliver's natural eyesight caught sight of Amanda. He instinctively stepped in front of his mother and sister, eyeing her warily. Amanda paused for a moment, realizing that Oliver was unaware of their connection. The more she thought about it, the more intrigued she found the family. Without speaking to them, she left with a half-smile. Back at the Quinn mansion, after dinner, Moira retired to rest, leaving her and her siblings alone. "Let's go for a walk," Oliver suggested. Thea nodded, and the two of them headed outside. Thea hesitated as they reached the empty graves of Robert Sr. and Oliver. "I know a few things about you. I've been on the island for the past few years," Oliver said with a smile. "Yaofei told me. You didn't know, but he's returned to Purgatory Island." Thea's mouth widened slightly. It looked like old man Yaofei hadn't recovered from his illness yet. Why would he go back out of nowhere? This old man just couldn't live a good life, did he? No need to guess. Since she'd met Yaofei, she'd probably also met Shadow. Thea scratched her head. I'm sorry. I did want to get you off the island, but I got delayed. No need to apologize. I wouldn't have gone with you then, Oliver interrupted. The sibling grudges faded, and the conversation became easier. Your skills are pretty good. Did old man Yao Fei teach you again? Thea noticed immediately upon meeting him. It was hard to judge the level of Oliver in the original time and space, but comparing the Oliver she saw now to people she knew, Thea felt he was about the same as Nightwing, perhaps even a little better. Talia was currently busy organizing the League of Assassins, so she couldn't possibly be teaching Oliver. Thea suspected they might not even know each other, but considering old Yao's experience returning to Infernal Island, it wasn't hard to guess that Oliver had undergone new training. No need for all your weird tricks. Want to fight? Oliver challenged. Who's afraid of who? After a few days of acting, Thea was itching to get her hands dirty. The siblings arrived at a backyard of Quinn's old house, where there was a large training area. Unlike in their past, Moira's physical fitness had greatly improved, allowing her to exercise regularly. Thea recommended the simple and easy-to-learn karate technique, relying on her stats to crush ordinary people. She didn't aim to become a master, just to be able to protect herself in times of crisis. A close combat, Thea watched Oliver pull 2 wooden swords from the shelf, and she was all right. She put her hair up, rolled up her sleeves, kicked off her high heels, and grabbed 2 wooden swords as well. She suppressed her stats to that of an average person and took a stance, waiting for Oliver to strike first. Oliver had initially intended to let his sister attack first, but seeing the sudden burst of momentum, he quickly changed his mind. Sharp, tenacious, and unmatched were all ways to describe Thea's aura at that moment. Though she didn't attack, her presence alone revealed a formidable opponent. His sister was surprisingly formidable. The Thea before him was so different from what he remembered. He'd seen many fights and battles over the years, but Oliver had never seen anyone who could match Thea's aura. His competitive spirit took over, and he took his time. He carefully observed the situation, his left hand in front, his right hand behind, before launching the first attack. Use all your strength, Thea effortlessly parried Oliver's blow, her right hand mercilessly lashing out at his arm. Oliver reacted quickly, his feet swiftly shifting sideways. He deftly blocked both of Thea's blades with his left wooden sword, then swept his right across her abdomen. Thea pushed off the ground, leaping back a step. With a flick of her wrist, she spun lightly in midair, slicing Oliver across the face. The brother and sister exchanged more than 10 quick blows, and Thea was somewhat surprised to find she wasn't gaining much of an advantage. Oliver had learned all his close combat skills from Deathstroke, but unlike Deathstroke's ferocious style, he was less aggressive, preferring a more defensive-minded approach. While Oliver possessed a strong defense and sharp offense, he wasn't yet at his peak, but he had already developed a unique fighting style. Given time, he might even be able to rival Batman. While Thea found her brother's attacks impressive, Oliver was astonished. That day on Inferno Island, Thea had used mostly magic against the 3 men. Oliver hadn't realized his sister's skills were so advanced. By this point, Oliver had surpassed Deathstroke's former teacher and possessed a unique understanding of combat. However, no matter how he shifted his tactics, he couldn't penetrate Thea's defenses. Thea detected a hint of competitive spirit in Oliver and amused herself. She didn't want to defeat her brother on their first day together. After all, they had grown up together, and the bond was much deeper than with Tommy on the other side. To save Oliver's face, Thea secretly slowed down her speed by another 20%. By then, Oliver was finally able to keep up with her attacks, and the two exchanged more than a dozen moves before ceasing their attacks. Thea finally confirmed her assessment. Oliver's melee skills were comparable to Nightwing's. Considering his exceptional ranged talent, with a bow and arrow, he was second only to Lady Shiva and Batman among ordinary people, and slightly stronger than Nightwing Talia. The siblings, uninterested in continuing the fight, strolled through the leaf-covered hills behind. What exactly is magic? Do you know, Constantine? Oliver pondered before asking the question that had puzzled him for a long time. Magic is a form of energy that ancient humans, drawing on demonic languages and otherworldly creatures, used to explore the truth of the world. What? Did you meet Constantine? I don't know him, but I know him as a notorious individual, not a good person. Thea was puzzled. Oliver shouldn't have known Constantine again. Hearing his sister's comments about Constantine, Oliver recalled something and smiled wryly. He's quite the jerk. I met him on Inferno Island. He was looking for some kind of orb, the sphere of Horus, Thea exclaimed, stunned. Oliver nodded. That seemed to be the name. A wave of emotion welled up in Thea's heart, and she pondered silently. She had taken the orb and traveled back to 1918 to give it to Madame Xanadu. Could it be that Madame Xanadu had buried it on Inferno Island? It had traveled all the way around, finally ending up in Constantine's hands. And how did that jerk Constantine and Oliver finally meet? It was a testament to the whims of fate. Chapter 400 Alien Management Committee. That evening, Thea gathered Oliver and Moira and presented them with a super gene optimization fluid she had developed, explaining its uses and precautions. She also gave Oliver the diluted divine blood she had prepared earlier. As for how he would plan his own plans, that was his own business. If he insisted on rejecting the supernatural, as Batman did, Thea couldn't help it. She couldn't just force him to give her an injection, could she? Everything was voluntary. The opportunity was given, and the choice was entirely yours. The next morning, Thea summoned mother and son to discuss returning Oliver's shares. Oliver refused, emphatically stating that he hadn't returned for the money. But under Thea's increased insistence, he finally accepted the proposed division. The Quinn Group was Robert S.R.'s life's work, and Thea herself wasn't his flesh and blood. Now that Oliver had returned, it was only natural that his share should be returned to him. Furthermore, Thea already had her doctorate, and the new group's transformation into a high-tech enterprise was a foregone conclusion. Thea didn't want to carry a doctorate, followed by a phalanx of construction workers and excavators and bulldozers. That would be too pretentious. Oliver, with his elementary school education and muscular build, was well suited to a foreman's role. The new split was simple: divest the original Quinn construction division entirely and give it to Oliver. With the ongoing wars in the coming years, the construction team would definitely have enough to earn a living, though the work would be much more tedious. With the construction division gone, only the new R&D, medical, and new materials and polymer compounds departments remained. Thea's wealth, once close to Luthor and Batman, had been slashed by over 30%, but the staff had been reduced by 90%, and her worries by 70%. Oliver would now have to worry about the nitty-gritty of the construction industry. The happy and carefree days lasted only 2 days before the controversy at the 5 permanent members meeting spread among the higher-ups, and Thea was urgently summoned to the Batcave. The 5 permanent members held their national conference, while Thea and the other heroes met in the Batcave. Superman, Martian Manhunter, Thea, Diana, and Batman, the host, made up exactly 5 people. Thea had originally planned to introduce Martian Manhunter and Diana, but surprisingly, they not only knew each other but were actually quite familiar with each other. Thinking about it, it wasn't surprising. Martian Manhunter had been on Earth for 200 years, and Diana had been in the modern world for over 100, so it was natural for them to know each other. Everyone, the 5 permanent members have been discussing those hundreds of thousands of aliens for 3 days now. What are your thoughts on this? Batman, the convener, spoke first. First, let's restore their bodies. I just took a quick look, and many of them are already very weak, Superman said. We need to confiscate their weapons before we can provide them with food, Martian Manhunter added. Thea and Diana echoed similar sentiments. The heroes were all on the same page on this point. No one would argue that killing all those hundreds of thousands of aliens would be unjust. A preliminary plan was agreed upon, but a major disagreement arose regarding the subsequent resettlement. Superman, drawing on his own experience, believed they should cultivate a bond with Earth, perhaps even assigning them a job or something. Martian Manhunter believed they should simply be driven out, while Diana advocated for resettlement, with designated areas for them to inhabit. Each of the 3 men argued their case, their voices rising, none able to convince the other. Did you meet with the president before you arrived? Batman observed their argument calmly, unfazed, and turned to ask Thea, who was also observing the scene. Thea wanted to laugh at the thought. Mr. President actually thinks we should settle aliens in Afghanistan and withdraw U.S. troops? I'm dying of laughter, Batman snorted. You're going to New York tomorrow. What are your thoughts on this? Without giving it much thought, Thea said firmly, accept them. The future of Earth needs to unite all forces that can be united. They're intelligent life forms, no less powerful than us. She couldn't bring up the disappearing Doomsday and Darkseid, but Brainiac was no less threatening this time. Thea continued, did you see the robot on the spaceship this time? That's just one of Brainiac's countless clones. Even Krypton, as powerful as it was destroyed. I don't think Earth could withstand it. Before Batman could reply, Superman, with his sharp ears, turned and asked, was Krypton really destroyed by that AI? About 70% or 80% likely. That's what the Lantern's investigation concluded. There were many different opinions about who destroyed Krypton, and Thea didn't dare to make a final statement. Superman was lost in the tragic death of his kin, and Martian Manhunter and Diana lost interest in the debate. In the final analysis, they were all meddling in other people's business, and no one paid attention to their opinions. When Thea clearly supported her lover, Batman carefully considered and agreed to Diana's resettlement plan in the designated area. This was a bit far from Martian Manhunter's goal, but it was still a compromise. He finally agreed, and Superman had no choice but to abstain. The hero's opinions were only one side of the story. The next day, Thea, who was getting better and better, had to go to New York to accept inquiries from the 5 permanent members' conference and persuade them to pass this resolution. Dr. Quinn, an old man, asked first. Yes, Thea had studied hard for 5 years and finally got rid of that damn Miss title. This incident also fully demonstrated her intelligence. The title of doctor in front of her name was well deserved. Can't those aliens be sent back to their original planets? Thea nodded slightly. Gentlemen, of the 20 glass domes, current investigations have shown that only 7 still show signs of life, and the planets have long been destroyed. Collecting the essence of cities and destroying the other planets has always been the collector's principle. So far, the only planet that has survived after a city has been collected is Earth. After interacting with them frequently, Thea understood the principles of dealing with them. Even Batman needed to be honest. Intimidation was the best way to deal with them. Old people are wise, and those who have made it into this room are no fools. Thea's subtext was easy to discern. What did this mean? It meant the aliens would come again. They all understood the principle of driving out the wolf and devouring the tiger, and pointing a united gun at the outside. The 2 men, who had initially been tough, immediately softened. After Thea finished her statement, she left. The debate continued for another day, finally reaching a conclusion after Thea had gotten some sleep. They're being concentrated in the Nevada desert, with a special commission set up to coordinate and supervise the aliens and resolve any conflicts between them and Earthlings. Dr. Thea is in charge. What the heck is this? Thea's a bit funny. Is this a real-life Area 51? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.